Okay, we are live. Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review, or four movie reviews actually. In anticipation for Michael Bay's latest Transformers film, The Last Night, me and George are going to jump on a review for all four of the previous entries in the films: Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, Dark of the Moon, and Age of Extinction. Now, for those of you who've been following the channel for a long, long time, you know my thoughts on Transformers based on my reactions. I'm probably other little quips and side comments I've done on other videos. And people are very sure aware of George's very fondness for this franchise. So we have butted heads quite a long time on the channel and behind the scenes and everything like that. But we felt that it was the right time now to go through these films with one coming out. So we're going to go through the first movie now. Transformers came out in 2007. And George, we'll start off with you. Your history with the franchise and sort of if you can remember back to it, the first time seeing Transformers in the theatre.
I can. This was a very interesting experience. I was 10 years old, almost 11, and I'd never seen the animated series. I knew of the concept of Transformers. This was a film I thought would look really cool, and without going into too much of my personal life, I'd finished primary school. I don't know what that isn't for American people, but primary school for us is a big deal. You do nothing until you get to secondary school. And I was in Leamington once. Something I used to do, this sort of gaming thing, which I'm definitely not going into details on. And I left like all my stuff there. I dropped it off my mum's work, and for the first ever time, I went to the cinema by myself, and I could feel the rebel within that a 10-year-old on his own snuck into a 12A. It'd been done many times before under parents' guidance, but not by myself. I'd never been to the cinema by myself. It was daytime. I guess this is the beginning of my cinematic experiences of how I love daytime showings. And there was 4 people in the room, and this was like the release day. And it blew my mind. And not only was this the first ever Transformers film I watched, this was the first ever Michael Bay film I watched. And nothing has been the same since. What transcribed on screen in not just one, but 3 more films that follow this has been nothing short of beautiful. I will go and defend this to my dying breath. I absolutely adore these. Wow, I say not all of them because I despise 2, but we'll get to that. But as a franchise, I adore it. I've got my IMAX tickets ready for Thursday. I will be at the first screening my IMAX is doing, and I cannot wait to watch it again. But in terms of going back to the concept about wafting us, I was watching this. I was new to Transformers, completely new. I didn't know who Megatron was. I didn't know who Optimus Prime was. I knew who Sheila Booth was because it was like, oh my god, even Stevens is in a big movie. That was a pretty weird growing up experience. But this is where I guess we say we clash heads before, but with this franchise we are complete opposites. So what was it like before you watched this film?
Yeah, so you mentioned that this film and the ones that followed it were beautiful. I would say that beauty is very much in the eye of the beholder when it comes to this franchise. So for me, going into the first movie, I would have been, if you said what you were 10 going on 11, I would have been 13 going on 14. So I would say that me and you were kind of the ripe age for what this film was geared towards and the audience it was for, because this is like a movie made by a teenage kid for teenagers. So the history of the franchise. So I saw the 86 Transformers movie growing up as a kid. Now, I didn't have the video myself, and I'm trying to think back when I must have watched it. And my uncle has like thousands of VHS cassette tapes, so I'm assuming I saw it there. I used to go over every week, so I probably watched it a few times. And from that, I kind of grasped, who Optimus Prime was, who Megatron were, and we'll get to our review to that tomorrow. But they're not in the movie for all that long. But I do remember the first part of that movie very vividly in my head. And then from that, and it must have been after Revenge of the Fallen came out, I wanted to go back and check the cartoon series out. So I bought the DVDs. I think I watched a couple of reruns as a kid as well. Basically, I knew the characters. I knew what the Autobots and Decepticons were, the theme song, the music, everything like that. Absolutely loved it. And I'm also going to point this out in the review as well. I am going to speak as I find in this review. I've been very negative of the Transformers films in my reaction. If there is some good aspect in any of these movies, I'll be the first one to acknowledge that. So I went to see this film. I was on a family holiday at Blackpool with my mum and my dad. And I remember seeing trailers for Transformers and thought it looked absolutely incredible. And I forced them to go to the cinema with me. It was Odeon at Blackpool, 2007. And I was on like a huge high after it finished. I absolutely loved it. I'd never really seen an action movie like that before. Now, I know we'd seen loads of cities get blown up and everything like that, and I guess we can talk more about this in the action section. But seeing giant robots to this scale and like the quality of the effects interacting with a city just in this huge action climax, I had never seen that before. And I guess for one thing, you can say that this movie was kind of the foundation stone of all future blockbuster climaxes, for better or worse, I guess. But no, that's sort of like my history with it. I loved all the Transformers characters. I learned all the names. You learn the vehicles, everything that goes along with it. And I'm sure this was a huge merchandise boost as well. But no, I do have fond memories of the first one. And if I'm going to give my overall opinions on it now, the first one's definitely my favorite. I think it's probably the most watchable one out of them all. It's the shortest one by far. And I guess to steal a John Turturro line from Revenge of the Fallen, it has a beginning, middle, end, facts, plot, detail, and it tells it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Transformers 1.
My quick thoughts. I thoroughly enjoyed the first one. It's not my favorite. It's my second favorite. But in terms of cinematic experiences go as a whole on the franchise, I mean, I'll go into each experience watching them as we get to them, but in terms of what you go to the cinema for, the definition of a summer blockbuster, they tick all the buttons. You know, giant robots, CGI, likable characters to a degree, the try and be comic, funny moments, action scenes, epitomizes the summer blockbuster. That's why they come out in June time all the time, or a bit of July. But these, I've got fond memories, certainly of 1, 3, mainly. But I'm not going to lie, you're going to be honest when you like some scenes, and I'll say, these aren't God's gift. This isn't the Godfather trilogy as such. But I love them for what they are.
Mm. See, I think what it is, I'm sure we'll have the discussion at the very end of the review. I think what it comes down to is you just see these as fun, action, escapism, the humor and everything like that, whereas I see that these are characters and, you know, personalities of characters that I grew up with and I liked, and kind of Michael Bay is doing more or less everything wrong with the property that I like, so I come down on it on that aspect. But, I mean, for people that do like these films, I can, well, apart from like Revenge of the Fallen, mate, we'll get onto that anyway. I'm rambling at this point. Let's get on to characters, though. So you mentioned that you saw Sheila Booth in, what was it you saw him in?
Even Stevens was that the funniest show. I guess you get the term 90s kid, and Even Stevens is that show on CITV or CBBC in England. He was absolutely hilarious as a teenager. He's really funny. I know a lot of people knew him from Holes, but I have seen him across many years. One of my favourite shows. And then he was in a Transformers film. And that was, obviously I didn't know what Transformers was, but seeing him in like trying to be serious as such, but still like goofy person, where I just literally saw the character that he played in Even Stevens continuing into this. And fun fact for Transformers 3, you get a reunion with him and his dad from Even Stevens as well.
See, I saw him in Holes, what you just mentioned. That was the first film I saw him in. I think we did that at school in like year 8 or something like that. And I'm going to speak as a fight. I think a lot of the blame for these films are kind of pinned on him. It's almost like the Hayden Christensen effect with the Star Wars prequels. And I don't think that's completely merited. I don't really like the character of Sam. I think his character is probably the strongest in the first film. But in terms of Shia LaBeouf's acting, I actually think he's a pretty naturalistic actor in most of the stuff I've seen him in. Even like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones, which is not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination. But I do always think he gives it his all, and he definitely does have that personality. And I think he has a likability to him, especially in this film. But maybe, again, because I was a teenager and going into it, I kind of connected with the Sam character. You know, he gets this awesome car. He gets one of the hottest chicks on the planet. All these things that you kind of just go through your head as a teenage boy. It's why it's like the perfectly crafted film for that age bracket, I think.
Yeah, he's exactly what he is. The way the character is written, Shia LaBeouf can do because it's so natural to him. He is likable. And yes, before we get into Megan Fox, everything goes right for him. He's like, what, 16, 17 in this? He's meant to be. And like he ends up finishing the film with Megan Fox on like one of the nicest cars on the planet. It's that kind of, these are made for teenage kids. And, you know, you see that in him. He's a teenager. It makes sense to have him as a teenager and putting him through that kind of that happy kid experience with giant robots as well. I don't know if I'm wafting on, but I really like Shia LaBeouf in these. We'll get into 4 when that happens, but Shia LaBeouf was right for what they wanted to do with the first film.
Yeah. And some people might be wondering why we're talking about the human characters first. Well, to me, I think these films put a bigger focus on the human characters than they do the Transformers. The Transformers almost feel like supporting characters in their own movie. So we will get to the Transformers in a minute. Let's talk Megan Fox then, playing the character of Michaela Baines. Now, as I said, she is there for one function and one function only. And Michael Bay makes no qualms of telling you what that reason is. With the shot where she's, it's the one that was on all the posters where she's angled over the car. Camera zooms in on her abs and all other things to do with her. That's the only reason she's in this movie. She's in there purely for the eye candy. And that's been a trait that's gone through all of these films. It looks like he's also doing it with the fifth one. Michael Bay knows his strengths, He knows the ingredients of what a good sort of blockbuster movie needs. And he doesn't shy away from that at all.
Well, I guess to some degree, she was like one of my first crushes. So I think that says the same for everyone of our generation. I'll just be the one that says it. He nailed it. Yeah, that's what you can say. He knew exactly what he was doing. And it was a frenzy for the age generation there on in.
Yeah. I mean, he arguably tops the shot in the second one with the whole stenciling the motorbike, which we'll get again. I think that's why she left, didn't she? Because she's only in the first two, and I think we'll get to that with the third one. But that's really all I can say about her character, because there is nothing to her character. Let's move on to Captain William Lennox, then played by Josh Duhamel. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's kind of a big focus in this movie as well, especially because the US military play a big part in these movies, and I think they even donated quite a lot of their vehicles to the film, which saved on production costs as well with him. I don't really have anything against the character. He can be kind of annoying, he's a little bit bland, but in this one more so than any of the other ones. And actually, it's a plot point that never comes up again. They set him up that, he's got a wife and a kid that he's trying to get back to. He's in the war. He speaks to them on Skype, and he doesn't really get much time with them. And then he kind of completes that character arc at the end of the movie when he returns to them. It's a very stock character trait, and he's really just there to front the whole US military side to this story.
I like him in this film. He's got the best story arc in terms of the emotional attachment. You want to see him get home. Almost opening scene, one of the few survivors of that first attack. You're automatically connected to him in that sense that, okay, you've seen what he's been through. And I guess this film is the accumulation of multiple characters' journeys. You've got Sam on one hand, the army on the other. And, of course, they cross over as things get towards that final layer. And I like him. He's not a strong lead, but he works as a head of this kind of supporting characters, I guess you could say. And I think there's a reason they stuck with him for future films, because his storyline is integral to the Transformers. So for what happens in the future films, it makes sense they keep coming back to him. And he is going to be in the fifth one as well. That's been well known for a while now.
Mm-hmm. And then to go alongside with him, you have Epps as well, kind of serves the same function. I'd say he's more comedic out of the two. I never really liked the character. Well, I didn't really like any of the military characters, in all honesty, and I never really thought much of Epps. But having now seen the Fast and Furious movies and Tyrese Gibson being my favorite character in those films, I guess it's going to be an interesting experience if I do watch these films again, which I don't see myself doing anytime soon. I don't think Epps is in the fifth one, though. Is he? I think it's just Lennox.
I don't actually know. I hope he's in the fifth one. I'd assume he would be, but then again, he's been the fast ones. He's been printing his money from there. But they keep saying people have left, and then they keep saying they've come back. I don't have a clue these days of who's there, but Josh Duhamel's been all over the premiere, so I just knew he was back in the new one.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just so machismo, isn't it? I mean, if you look at some of Michael Bay's other films like Armageddon, and I'm drawing a blank on all of his other films now, but they all kind of have similar qualities to them. They always have this, gung-ho, Murica, everything shot at magic hour at sunset. There's always a US flag billowing in the background. I think he kind of ramps that up more as the films go on, but that's definitely prevalent here. We've got to talk about Sam Witwicky's parents as well, Ron and Judy, who feature in the first three films. Okay, well, I like Ron. I can't say the same for Judy. Judy is really annoying. There's loads of awkward, cringeworthy comedy where she's talking about Sam's dick or masturbating and all kinds of things like that, which just have no place in a Transformers film. Ron, however, now he's an actor. Kevin Dunn plays him, who I've seen in a few films. I remember him from films growing up like Small Soldiers, a few other things. There's always that supporting character where you see him in a film, you go, I recognize you from this, this, and this. You never really remember his name. But George, there's a joke in this film towards the beginning that Sam Witwicky's dad says, which I think we both in agreement is probably one of the best jokes in the entire franchise. If you want
not just the franchise, one of the best jokes in film for a long time. when he's going to buy him his first car. He's past secondary school, well, high school, I guess they call it, and he drives him through. Is it a Porsche garage? Yeah. And it's perfect to both of them. You've got Sheila Booth, and this is where the Even Steven stuff kicks in. They're like, oh my god, he's smacking the car windows. Like, you're getting me a Porsche, you get me a Porsche, and he just carries on driving. He just starts laughing. And he's like, what do you say? Like, no, you're definitely not getting a Porsche.
You're not getting a Porsche for your first car. Yeah.
And then he drives around the corner to like just the low of the low for him to go find his first car, which I still think to this day is one of the funniest jokes for a long time, because it's, you know, the double act of the mom and dad. I love them both. I know a lot of people don't like the mom, but they work. Like, you like the dad, the mom's annoying, but the moms are meant to be annoying and they're socially awkward. Whereas the dad's kind of like, oh, I can't be asked anymore. This is what's happening here. And I like them. They're nice support. When they come back to them in this one, they don't overstay their welcome, because it is integral to them. But I just, when they come back, it was like a bit of fresh air. I know this about the Transformers, but I do really like these two. And that is one of the other sad things about losing Sheila Booth in the new films.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love. Maybe they will bring him back. Maybe 6 will have LaBouffe and Wahlberg. I don't know. I think they're going to stick with Wahlberg though now at this point. And another big character in the trilogy certainly is Agent Seymour Simmons, played by John Turturro. You know what? I don't like his character at all, especially in the first movie, but John Turturro is one of the most likable actors there is, and you can tell that he just doesn't give a shit. Like most of the actors, they don't give a shit. But he shows up and he does his part. Again, I don't like his character. He gets he gets some funny quips, especially in the third film, which I'll get onto. I don't really have much to say about it. The whole Sector 7 plotline just kind of derails the entire movie for me. I just really don't care about it.
I kind of always liked him. I know it's the cheap comedy relief look he's wearing. Yeah. He's that government agent that's a bit of a douche, and he's wearing them funny pants, and he's going to get peed on by a Transformer car, and he's at the butt of the jokes. But I like him in these films. He's got a place in them, that the way that Michael Bay's done these films, it's the kind of the awkward comedy act that a couple of the lines will work and the others won't. But the couple of lines that do work across these films are always memorable, and I just love John Turturro. I saw this before The Big Lebowski, so I never knew him as Jesus until way after the Transformer films have come out. And I'm happy he's back in the new one. You can tell his absence, and you shouldn't be able to, but that says a lot about that fourth film, where you really did need him, and he is kind of one of the leads. That's what I would say. He's really took on the franchise. It's got a hold. I can't wait to see him share the screen with like Stanley Tucci.
I didn't even know he was going to be in the fifth one, so I don't know if that's piqued my interest more for the fifth one, because I am literally going in with the lowest of low expectations for last night, but it might be cool to see him back. Other characters, not really going to talk much more about these, but Anthony Anderson, he's one of my favourite comedic actors. I know he does serious stuff as well. I think he was in The Departed, if I remember rightly. But I know people are going to chalk it up to, like the racist stereotypical humor. You got like a black guy character who's just like shouting at the top of his lungs, and he's just really kind of loud and obnoxious. I think he's hilarious. I like the character of Bobby Bolivia as well, played by Bernie Mac. I know he passed away in 2008. He was a comedian. Other characters I don't really care about. You've got Rachel Taylor, who plays that Australian hacker chick. Again, she's just in it for more eye candy, really. She doesn't serve much of a function. She just kind of gets the plans from A to B to Sector 7. And then you've got John Voight's character, who, again, I really don't have much of an opinion on. I think towards the end of the film, when the action's going down, you kind of want to stay with the Autobots and the robots, but we kind of keep cutting back to them in that gunfight against Frenzy in the Hoover Dam, and I think it goes on a bit too long. I don't really care for their characters.
No, they're just a bit boring. You go, the cyber hacker. Oh, John Voight, he's not the president, but there's that whole weird Oreo joke with the president. He's meant to be George Bush, if I can remember.
Yeah.
But
is it Russell Johnson Ding Dong's darling or something, isn't it, when they're on the plane? Something like that.
It's not that good.
I do love the whole donut thing, though. Again, Anthony Anderson, that whole donut scene I think is hilarious. If I'm going to go to a joke, if I'm going to go through like scenes of Transformers, if I'm feeling particularly miserable with myself and want to relive some of these scenes, I will go back to the donut clip. I do like that. Finally, then, I guess we should get onto the Transformers, considering they should be our main characters in the film, and they're really kind of not. Optimus Prime then. Now, I know that we're going to differ on this. I love Optimus Prime. He's like, you know, you've got Batman, you've got all these archetype heroes, and you've got Optimus Prime is like at number 2 for me. I absolutely love Optimus Prime in the cartoon. And it was really nice that Michael Bay did get Peter Cullen back to do the voice, reprising his role from Generation 1 and the 80s movie. I can't imagine any other voice of Optimus Prime, in all honesty. Now, I'll get onto a voice acting for Megatron later, because I do have a problem with Michael Bay for his decision with that. But Optimus Prime, I like the new look. The one thing I don't like, and I mean, I don't know if you can see on my shirt, but you see how Optimus Prime's mouth is on that in the old cartoon, where it's just like a block silver thing? He does have that in this movie. I think it's when he like activates battle mode, for want of a better word, like when he's getting ready to go into battle, the visor goes across. But for most of this film, they do it where the mouth moves, and it just looks completely off. Like, I know that's, for me, like, I remember this design of Optimus, so it was kind of weird seeing it with a moving mouth. But I was reading up a bit about the history, and Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman, the screenwriters of this film, when they were coming up with ideas for it, they claimed to be huge fans of the franchises. They, you know, they originally wanted to do it where none of the robots spoke in this because they thought it would look weird, which just completely boggles my mind as to why that would even go through their heads if they're fans of the Transformers franchise. But yeah, no, I love Optimus Prime. He's solid in this movie.
He's on that level of Superman for me. He's
Just
a
really
really boring, two-dimensional, always gonna save the day. He's the leader of all the others because he has to be the leader, the John Cena type, you know. And the Hulk Hogan, he's just gonna come in at the last minute and just save the day, and he's just so boring. And I love Peter Cullen. I will say this, even though I don't like the character, I've always loved the design of him, the voice actor. It's nice they did, although I haven't seen the animated stuff, I've played the games, and Peter Cullen is that key voice that always comes up, and that's vital that they did include this. It's not just a great throwback, it's the right choice for casting it as well.
I do like the flame design as well on it. Like, I'm all for updating it. And one of my favorite scenes in the film actually is the arrival to Earth scene from the soundtrack, where all the Autobots come down in meteors. That is a flawless scene. There's a few bits in it which I'll get onto in a minute, which I don't like the fat kid that says this is easily 100 times cooler than Armageddon. I swear, he kind of looks like the equivalent of the new kid in the trailer for last night when he says, like, I'm going to hotwire this bitch. He looks like that kind of character. But when you see the proto form of Optimus Prime standing on the bridge, and when that truck goes past and he copies it, that was like just such a memorable moment for me in the cinema, as well as the effects work as well when he pulls in and he does that huge like 360 shot of him transforming. It was kind of everything I wanted it to be as a Transformers fan. I'll get onto some of the action later with him though. We need to talk Bumblebee, who's arguably probably a bigger focus now than Optimus Prime when this franchise continues, to the point where he's getting his own spin-off set in the 80s. What do you think of the Bumblebee character?
As boring as Optimus Prime. Listen, to me, Bumblebee's the merchandise one. People love Optimus Prime. Kids love Bumblebee. Like the Yoda, the little sidekick to the boss guy. Obviously, it's Samus car. I don't dislike him that much, but he's just boring. And this is me as a person. I've always preferred the villains to the good guys. It's like wrestling. It's like films. It's like a lot of people. But Bumblebee, I don't mind him. I love the whole talking through the radio. That's quite creative when they do stuff like that. I really did like that across the films. But I just don't have a lot of time for the character. However, saying that, I will still be there to watch the Bumblebee spin-off film. I'm very intrigued for this rumored Bumblebee and World War II thing that's going to be in the new Transformers film. Yeah, it's exactly. I guess he's the integral gap between the Transformers and the humans, and he always has been. So I'm just going to, he's that kid. He's the Jar Jar Binks, the merchandise one for the kids. I'll leave it at that. I don't mind that.
And I'm wondering if a big focus of that, and as to why that is the case, is because he is that silent character. I think that when Spielberg first pitched this movie, one of the ideas he had says, make the movie about a boy in his car. And you can kind of see that, although it's very much a Michael Bay film, do not get me wrong about that, but you can see those traits of what Spielberg may have done had he have directed this product. And I think with this movie, they've even said that the Bumblebee spin-off is going to follow the tone of a Iron Giant kind of feel, but I think that this first movie has qualities of that as well, with Bumblebee and Sam, especially at the scene towards the end where Bumblebee gets his legs blown off and you think he's not going to make it. I don't mind Bumblebee in the first movie. What I do hate by the ending, either the ending of this one or their treatment of it in the next one, is that he gets a voice at the end. They fix his voice box because they say that basically his vocal cords were damaged in a previous battle with the Decepticons. So he's that silent character, talks with radio, as you said, and then at the end he gets kind of this posh British butler kind of voice. And I remember like the ending of this movie where Optimus Prime says, you know, they've sent a distress call into space. They're going to get more Autobots. Bumblebee's got a voice. I was like fan fiction in what a sequel could be with all these ideas. And then in the next movie, they just take his voice away and just say like, oh no, he's still having problems. And they've never given him a voice since. So just at the point where Bumblebee could have had a character, they take it away. One scene I do like in the film with Bumblebee is that when he's in Bobby Bolivia's garage, the car parked next to him is the yellow Volkswagen Beetle, is it? I think that's what it is. The car that he was in the 80s cartoon. Although you could argue that Michael Bay's treatment of that scene where Bumblebee kind of slams the door on it is kind of a backhanded approach to the previous canon of the animated series. I don't know. I didn't really have a problem with Bumblebee in this, I guess is what I'm trying to say. What I do have a problem with, though, is kind of like all the bodily functions that the Transformers seem to have. Like, as these films go on, there's saliva, there's spit, there's blood in the third movie, which kind of comes out of nowhere. And in this one, there's a scene where Bumblebee kind of pisses on John Turturro's character. Scenes like that is just really juvenile and childish, which I don't need in my Transformers movie. But
well, he's a car, so he needs oil and petrol. So
well, I know, but do we need a scene where he like pisses on John Turturro? I guess what I'm trying to say. You don't need that. You know they've got oil in there. You don't need to do that. What I do like about this film as well is, though, that kind of not on the Decepticon half, but they really do narrow the cast down for how many Autobots there are. I think there's 5, isn't there, in total? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's 5 of them. So we've got Jazz, who's probably the most underdeveloped of the Autobots.
One of my favourite scenes from the film involves Jazz.
Yes. Talk about Jazz for a while.
Yeah, was he a Porsche? He was a nice Porsche.
Mm-hmm.
He was that little cocky, quick one, doing that slide step punch in. Thought he's a big shot. He probably thought he would be the new Optimus Prime. Much like Dak from The Empire Strikes Back, who says he feels like he can take on the whole Empire. Jazz has that moment, except it ends like the Family Guy sketch where, for those that don't have a clue what I'm on about, Dak just dies in The Empire Strikes Back straight away. And in the Family Guy sketch, he flies up into space, this solo snow speeder, and he looks at the whole entire Empire, their navy, and they just tap a bomb on him. It's basically this film where Jazz just comes up to Optimus Prime. You want a piece of me? And
Megatron.
No, Megatron. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Bad mistake there. Megatron says, "Do you want a piece of me?" And Megatron says, "No, I want 2," and picks him up, rips him in half. It's a wonderful moment. We don't get enough moments like that in films anymore. I'm sure there was a Porsche dealership somewhere in the world that was devastated that their merchandising was now gone for this film. But yeah, and it made Megatron look more of a badass. But Jazz, great scene. Thank you. It was a very funny laugh when I watched it, and it still is funny.
And going back to that line you just said with Hugo Weaving and Jazz's character, I love shitty dialogue like that. I think I've said that before. Like going back to like the original Star Wars film with lines like, "When I left you, I was but a learner. Now I am a master. Only a master of evil Darth." That's not a good line, but it's like classic kind of Saturday morning cartoon dialogue, and that's what Transformers absolutely was. Like, don't get me wrong, the cartoon of Transformers isn't Shakespeare or anything like that. It's so cheesy. It's a product of its time. But hearing a line like that did kind of take me back to the cartoon, because that is something that would probably be in that film, although probably not as graphic. But with Jazz's character, and I do like Jazz in this film, but you can see elements of where Michael Bay would go, especially with the second movie, in terms of his kind of racist, well, not even kind of racist, his racist depiction of some characters. Like, for example, I think Jazz's opening line in this film is like, "What's cracking, little bitches," or something, and he kind of folds his arms and sits on a car. He kind of has, like Optimus Prime says, like, Autobots roll out, and then he just kind of goes, "We rolling," and then just like runs after it. So there's elements like that are lessened in this movie, but are definitely ramped up in the other ones. But I don't really have a problem with Jazz, probably because that moment at the end. I also love the scene as well where he kind of, doesn't he like take on the tank brawl at the end, and he does like this awesome kind of flip onto it and like rips one of the arms off. I thought that was really cool.
I can't remember. I remember the scene, but I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
Is it Ironhide or is it Jazz? I don't actually know. I love Should we get into Ironhide?
Ironhide does that like slow-mo corkscrew that was in all of the trailers.
Yeah, Ironhide is a character I actually really liked. The Autobots. He's the muscle. He's the rock. He's the big guy with the big guns. And I think when you first meet him in the alleyway scene where he's got the guns out on Sam, that scene just kind of sets the tone for each of the individual Transformer on the Autobot side. And you know that this guy is the heavy metal guy. He's obviously his design. He's the big truck, and I really like him in this. He makes sense for him to be on the Autobots team. That's literally all you have to say about him, to be fair.
Yeah, well, I will say Ironhide is voiced by a guy called Jess Harnell. He's a really big voice actor. He voiced a lot of characters throughout like 90s cartoons and even ones to this day. And he actually also did the voice for Barricade as well. Our username Ladiesman217. So it's cool how he did two very different voices. I love the character of Ironhide. I like how he quotes Clint Eastwood. "Are you feeling lucky, punk? Dirty Harry" is the first thing he says to Shia LaBeouf. And although there's not really much to his characters, he kind of just shows up for action scenes, and he's the cool ones. He's the tank of the group with the big blasters. When he eventually does die in the third one, it did kind of get to me a bit because I did like his character, even if he was kind of a background one. You have Ratchet as well, who's the medic. Doesn't really do much. Again, I like the voice. When he died in the fourth one, I was really upset when he went. But this is a recurring theme now, and we'll get onto this definitely when we talk about the Decepticons. What we're saying now, by how much we talked about the human characters, and we get to the Transformers, and we kind of go, well, they're cool, but we don't really know much about their character. There's not really a lot to say about them. That, to me, is a huge problem of these films, especially when it's a Transformers film. The focus should be on the robots. We should know more about these characters, especially when it's a 5-movie franchise. Imagine, look at what Lord of the Rings accomplished in the trilogy. Look at what Star Wars accomplished in the trilogy. What could this have accomplished with 5 movies? Some movies which are like 3 hours a piece. I do think they neglected a lot of the characters, which is a big shame. But let's get on to the opposing side then. Let's get on to the Decepticons. So although he's not in the first movie all that much, there's a great build-up to him. George, let's talk some Megatron.
I love Megatron. He is just a badass, doesn't give a damn. He's going to kill who he wants vibe. I think you see him flick a human, and he says, "Is it Megatron?" It's like
disgusting.
Yeah.
I actually think that's Michael Bay cameoing in his own movie when he flicks him. So I guess that's kind of a metaphor for the entire series. When Megatron says that,
I just loved him, and what I love, there's nothing more sometimes when you watch a film is a big build up to a villain. They're speaking about Megatron for the whole film, Megatron this, Megatron that, and it's the build up that all the Decepticons are there trying to work under him to get Megatron back, and it's all about the build up to said character. A bit like, not to compare outright, but it takes 2 films to big up the Emperor. When the Emperor comes, he doesn't fault his delivery. When Megatron comes at the end, he doesn't fault. He's just the badass, and I love him in it, and I think he's great in this. I don't have any issues with the voice acting. I know some people this is again someone that's just new to the Transformers franchise with this film, but I like the voice they did with him. I liked his design. I like the fact that he doesn't take on a human vehicle or anything. He's, I believe, a Cybertron jet, and again, he just doesn't give a shit. He's just going to go out there and kill some Transformers and try and get the cube.
Yeah, and actually, I'll talk about the cube in a minute because I thought that was cool how they used that. They did want to use something called the Matrix, which they use in the second film. They didn't want to do it for the first film, I think, because the Matrix was still fresh in people's minds. Although that came out in '99 and this came out in 2007, so I wouldn't really call that fresh in people's minds. But Megatron, yeah, the voice acting thing. So in the cartoon, you have Peter Cullen as the voice of Optimus Prime, and the voice of Megatron was by a voice actor called Frank Welker, who's done hundreds and hundreds of credits. He even voices a couple of the side characters throughout the franchise, but he eventually got his voice in these films properly with the character of Galvatron. So he was kind of returning to the character of Megatron in some aspect. The reason Michael Bay didn't want to bring him on for this movie is because he reviewed the old cartoon series and he said that he didn't find Frank Welker's voice that menacing, which I think's bullshit because, I mean, if you have like the animated Batman, for example, you've got Kevin Conroy. It would be like bringing Kevin Conroy back and saying like Mark Hamill, like, oh no, I don't like his voice. Frank Welker made the character of Megatron his own. He was the character of Megatron. And I thought that was kind of an underhanded way to go there. Nevertheless, you bring in Hugo Weaving. Hugo Weaving is one of the best talents working in the business today, whether that be voice acting or whether that be just, live action acting. He is great. He did the first 3 films, obviously. He ended with Dark of the Moon, but there was a lot of behind-the-scenes things with Hugo Weaving where he didn't give a shit. And I think he left, didn't he, like outright publicly say like he wants to focus on good roles now or something like that. I think he said something to that effect.
There was something that was said where he's like, it was like, was it $200,000 or $2 million for 20 minutes of work? He just didn't care. It's doing ADR. It's so easy to some actors. They're not bothered by it.
And there's a behind-the-scenes video as well on YouTube you can find. I think it's called Transformers Voices or something. The thumbnails of Peter Cullen in the recording booth. And they've got Hugo Weaving in there doing the voice of Megatron, and he's like reciting this alien language, the Cybertronian language that's used throughout the movie. And he just sort of goes, but what does it mean? And even he's like, I'm reading this shit and it has no point in the movie, but I'm just doing it to show up. I like Hugo Weaving, as I said, and the voice does fit the character. I would have liked to have seen Welker in there, though. But I do like the build up to Megatron now. I know that would be a big thing for some fans, that Megatron only really shows up throughout in like flashbacks and stuff to tie him into the story, but he only really shows up in the last action scene. I don't really have a problem with that. In terms of the last action scene, though, the one thing that I don't like is that you have Optimus Prime and Megatron for the first time in live action on screen together. You're ready to see them fight. And this happens actually quite a lot throughout these films as well, in that the camera, you want it to center on the Transformers. You want to see these two fight, but it will keep cutting away to the human characters. It's almost like the new Godzilla film that came out. And like the old dialogue from the 86 movie, at the end of this day, one shall stand, one shall fall. You hear that as background audio while it focuses on Sam Witwicky, and I just think that's a really missed opportunity when we had Megatron in it. That's just a side point. We also have Starscream as well, who's a character I love in the cartoon series, and I like him for the scenes that he's in these films. We don't get enough of him, and we certainly don't get enough of him in this first movie. I think he only has one line where he says the humans have taken it. We get none of that bickering back and forth between leader of the Decepticons and the second in command. Starscream's a character that's always vying to be the leader of the Decepticons. He's always plotting, not even behind Megatron's back. Most of the times in the cartoon series, he was doing it right to Megatron's face, but for some reason, Megatron kept him around, which was kind of funny. I like the design. I think is it an F-22 jet or something like that? Yeah,
I love the design. With the CGI of this film, we'll get to it later, but Starscream is one of those where I just remember his opening scene looks stunning when he first comes into it.
Yeah, one of my favourite shots of Starscream in this film, one of my favourite shots in the film, is where he flies down low into the street, transforms, and he kind of skids, and it goes into slow motion towards the end. I know that it's really difficult to narrow these scenes down because there's a lot of slow motion in these films, but that's one of my favourite scenes. Barricade actually gets quite a lot to do in this film. Now, I know when they were originally thinking of which Autobots they were going to have on each side, they pretty much had the lineup from the cartoon series. Like most of the main ones, like RC was going to be in this movie. On the Autobot side, you were going to have Soundwave, you were going to have Shockwave, you're going to have all these main core Decepticon and Autobot characters, but they kind of changed up. I guess it was to bring more toys out. I don't really know the ins and outs of it. But Barricade is the cop car character who is pretty cool. He gets a big action scene throughout the film. I think he shows up again towards the end of it. But again, no real character, no real motivation. He's just kind of a henchman character for a couple of action scenes. That's really all I can say about him. I do love that shot though, where on this, instead of to protect and to serve, it says to punish and enslave. I thought that was kind of a fun little thing they threw in.
I like the little hologram with him as well. That was a cool little add-on thing. The guy always looked a bit creepy.
Reminds me of like the T-1000 or something from Terminator 2.
Yeah, I like Barricade. He works as the kind of bumblebee villain, the other car, I guess you could say. And he fits what they're trying to do with the story.
And from Barricade, you have the little minion robot. And this is where I guess I could see a Soundwave character fitting into this first movie. I know Soundwave shows up in 2 and 3, but Soundwave's character has the 2 cassette tapes in the animated series where he has Laserbeak as one and Ravage, which is like the saber-toothed tiger-looking thing, is another one. In this one, they kind of switch it out where Barricade's got Frenzy, which is the little minion robot who I can't stand in this film. It's kind of that, not Skids and Mudflaps thing, but like the Wheelie character in the second one, the little remote control car one. It's kind of that annoying little jittery character throughout. Every time you see it, and they make a really big focus of him as well. I mean, he gets an entire action scene throughout the Barricade and Bumblebee fight. Again, it's a question of priorities. You want to see Barricade take on Bumblebee in that fight in the I don't know where they are, like facility, mining yard, wherever they are. You want to see that, but instead you focus on Sam and Michaela fighting this little piece of shit robot no one cares about. And then again, at the end, it keeps cutting back to them with the whole Sector 7 thing where they're trying to shoot it. I hate Frenzy in this movie, in all honesty. I kind of wish he wasn't in the movie.
Yeah, he's just there, isn't he?
Yeah. And I guess you can kind of say that for all the other ones too. I mean, you've got Brawl, which is the tank. I guess we can talk more about Blackout because he is technically the first Transformer you see in that movie. And to see that was just... I still remember that scene now, to this day, in the cinema.
It's one of my favourite scenes of the film. He's one of my favourite Decepticons. His death was a tragedy to all around us. Mm-hmm. He was an absolute badass in this film. And I love the helicopter design. He was, for the first Transformer scene, he's probably got the slowest transformation in the series, I guess you could say. That's because he's the revealed Transformer. I just remember seeing that, and then just like the explosions that come after. It was brilliant, and it set the story in motion. Yes. Josh Durham eventually kills him. I forgot the character name anyway, but it's their story arc that and Scorpion arc's like a part of him, I guess.
Yeah, again, it's like another one of those attachment robots. Weird. I remember seeing that shot even now when you watch it, when he kind of ejects it. It's such a weird shot how it's framed, and even then, I don't think that I clocked on that Scorpion arc was that one that was ejected. I don't think they say it in the movie. I mean, it's fairly obvious now when you watch it again, but I didn't see that. But yeah, no, that opening scene, that was because you get a great build up to it as well. You kind of see this helicopter and the army's like, we don't know what this is. It's it's in airspace. It shouldn't be there. Turn back before we shoot you down. And then when you finally do get that Transformer reveal, it's incredible. Again, I think it cuts away though. I think it starts transforming, and then it cuts to the bald military guy who says like, my God, and then it cuts back and it's already transformed. Although I will say though that in that scene, it's one of the only times in all the films where they use the classic soundbite of the 80s transforming sound effect. I think you can hear it briefly in that transformation. I kind of wish it was in all the transformations, but at least it was thrown in there in some respect. And Bone Crusher's really the only other Decepticon we can talk about, which is the one on the highway. I think they kind of fucked up with that because that's actually meant to be one of the Constructicons that forms Devastator in the next movie. But, I mean, they did that shot practically with the bus, and it's awesome. That highway shot, where it's almost like skating down the highway and it punches through the bus and the bus explodes. If you're going to go through like a montage of best scenes or best shots from this movie, that's definitely got to be in there.
Yeah. Oh, well, with that, is he the last Decepticon we're talking about?
Yeah.
Heading to the action, because the action in this, like I said, with practical effects, obviously a lot of this is CG, but there are some scenes and you feel like there has been some practical stuff, and I guess it's more in the desert. Obviously, it's not that there's a real Scorpion, but you feel like they've built these sets, and obviously it's so stupid to think, but with the Star Wars prequels, they didn't build any sets, it was just green screens, but you feel like these guys have put the actors out on locations, and then they've told them, this is going to be behind you, this is there, this is that, and I feel that helps the cast, and they integrate in perfectly the actual Transformers themselves. And I love that about the film, because it does feel real, and that adds to how good the CGI is rather than it just being fake. And the other thing, 10 years later, it hasn't aged badly at all. It's aged incredibly well. It still looks stunning, especially on Blu-ray.
Actually, and I haven't seen the first movie in a long while, or any of the other ones in that fact, but I think because they do blend it more well with CGI, with live action, in this one, I think that the effects from this one hold up the best out of all of them. Certainly when compared to stuff like Age of Extinction, which had some fairly questionable shots of CGI, even some aspects of Dark of the Moon as well. But this one looks solid. Like when I hate this scene so much, but even just in terms of how it looks great when they're in Sam Witwicky's garden, and like they're all like on the roof and like smacking into stuff. They integrate it so well. Action. What else? I think we've pretty much covered all the action scenes. In all honesty, we've covered the intro one. We've covered the barricade and Bumblebee fight. The final one. I will say as well, the final action scene, it's with these films now, they tend to devote like the entire last hour of the film to the big action climax, and you just get really fatigued. It gets really samey. This one had like the perfect length. I don't know how long it is. It's probably like 15, 20 minutes, I would say. But to me, in this one, at least, it didn't seem to outstay its welcome. It felt like it was just the right length for what it needed to be.
No, it felt fresh. As someone who's the franchise, I felt like, I guess the key is you want to go back wanting more, and you definitely get that from this film. Because, okay, I want to see what's next, what's going to happen next, how they're going to do this. Obviously, you get that little credit scene of Starscream flying off in the distance with the Linkin Park music. It was, for an opening film to introduce people to a franchise, I thought it did an exceptional job of that. And obviously, I guess you're a Transformers fan, but I would be intrigued to know the people that are in their like 30s or 40s, how they feel about this first one as well. Because it's such a big series that you don't realize how big it is. But now, the last two have grossed over $1 billion. It's huge, and to me, okay, I this entered my life when I was 10. It's not a film I can say this was my childhood series at all. That was Star Wars. There are going to be some kids that have grown up on these Transformers films. I've been to the cinema. There are kids dressed up as Bumblebee, dressed up as Optimus Prime, and this is going to have a big effect in the next 10, 15 years. And maybe it will be like a prequels where one day they wake up and this isn't as good as they thought it would be. But this has been massive, and I think this first film set the stone. It told you what was going to come, and the others have at least been consistent to that degree, that the franchise hasn't gone off on a tangent too much. That's why I'm intrigued by this cinematic universe aspects, because from the first Bumblebee film, the director they've got, it's very different to Michael Bay, and it's very interesting to see what could happen.
I just want to see some new blood take over from this franchise. I want to see them. I'd love to see them do a full-on reboot. I know it's too early and the films are still coming out. So if they did do a reboot, they need to distance themselves for about 10 years before they even went about doing another one. That's clearly not going to happen. Maybe they'll have like these kind of side projects which loosely tie in, but they won't refer to it all that much. The 80s spin-off with Bumblebee, for example, that is what I'm interested in seeing. I'd like to see the entire lineup of Transformers in it. If it's just going to be Bumblebee, that's fine. But the director of that, who did Cooper and the Two Strings, is the thing that's making me more intrigued about that film. Especially with this is going on a side, just like a tangent here. But Michael Bay, when he was offered to direct this, he initially dismissed it. I'm just reading here off Wikipedia because he called it a stupid toy movie, and he didn't want to do it. The only reason he wanted to do it was because Spielberg was attached to it, and I guess he wanted that notoriety of working with Spielberg. Getting a director like Michael Bay, who has no passion for this franchise at all, is the wrong thing to do. Like, if you look at, for example, Power Rangers that came out this year, I love that. That modernized the franchise. It paid homage. It paid tribute to what came before. It was still cheesy. I think that's probably the best modern remake adaptation of an older property I've ever seen. And I think a tone like that for Transformers could work, because you can tell the director of Power Rangers did like original Power Rangers, whereas I never really got that quality from Michael Bay, this movie. That's tangent anyway. Let's go on to the music, because one thing I've always said about the Transformers movies, no matter how bad I think they are, a good soundtrack can save some moments of a film, and Steve Jablonsky's soundtrack absolutely does that. He's done the soundtracks for all of them. I believe he's doing the soundtrack to 5 as well. Seems like he's full-on attached to this franchise now. The soundtrack to this film and all the films is incredible, and it definitely elevates those scenes that might be kind of average, might be kind of subpar, and brings them to something better. Arrival to Earth is probably my favorite track off the entire soundtrack. When the Autobots are coming down on the meteors, you do have a lot of cringeworthy comic relief in there, with like the little girl who says, "Excuse me, are you the Tooth Fairy?" or the fat kid that I mentioned earlier, with the whole Armageddon thing. It feels so much grander though with that soundtrack behind it. And it doesn't use any orchestral cues from the original Transformers theme. I would have loved to have seen that reworked in full orchestra by Steve Jablonsky. There's actually a great YouTube video by a composer, he's on YouTube, called Ominous Voice, who's done a rendition of what the 80s theme reworked for orchestra would sound like. That's a great video, so I recommend everyone check that out. But no, I cannot fault the soundtrack at all. It's absolutely flawless.
Yeah, the soundtracks, just as a whole for all of them, I absolutely love them. I think they've been absolutely wonderful. They've got some brilliant themes themselves. Obviously, there's the classic Transformers theme, which wouldn't ever work in these films. And
I think it could if you make it slightly more... You couldn't have the words in it.
That's what I mean. It's the Power Rangers reboot. They chuck it in as a kind of joke, big kind of Easter egg, I guess you could say. But this, I love what he does with these films. It makes it feel epic. And It's not John Williams, no, but it feels like a Steven Spielberg score. It suits what they're trying to do, and Scorponok's got his own themes. Some villains have their themes, some heroes do, and they mix it so well together. And this is a film that was nominated for Oscars, not for music, but in terms of a lot of sound stuff within it, that was all up for Oscars.
Yeah. And I mean, the Decepticons have got that kind of, it's like a chant, isn't it? Like a low chant that rises up. The Autobots have got their big brass song that plays throughout. And these themes do carry on as well through all the films. And that's what gives you that, what shred of emotional attachment I guess you can have to these films comes from the music, for me at least. This is a really quick side thing, because I said I was going to mention it earlier, but the whole cube thing, I really like that, because in the cartoon, that basically throughout most of the first series at least, every episode kind of has a similar formula, and the Decepticons are trying to get cubes of energy. So I guess that's why they made it a cube, and it kind of worked for the old thing. But I guess because we've got 3 other movies to talk about, go into overall opinions on Transformers 1.
It was a great opening film to a franchise. It was the perfect cinema blockbuster, and a great way to introduce not just myself but many new people to the series. And it set the stone while doing a sequel bait, but not an obvious sequel bait to what was to come in the future. And it did its job. And I enjoyed that, and I won't forget my experience watching that at the cinema for the first time.
The first time I watched this, I absolutely loved it. It's definitely got that, I won't say soft spot in my heart, but I do remember it fondly when I watched it. I probably wouldn't now, though, because I've seen all these tropes, the future Michael Bay films and what it eventually becomes. But I think out of all of them, it feels like the most cohesive one, the one that makes the most sense, the one that, as I said, had a beginning, middle, and end, and felt more like a movie, that it was going places. And I was more interested by the potential of where this movie could lead on to, which we'll get onto in a minute with Revenge of the Fallen. One thing I will say about the music as well, this was the first of our Linkin Park songs. Was it Numb? Is that what the song's called for this one? Or is it, no, What I've Done, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think was this one.
Yeah, What I've Done.
I do kind of have a soft spot for the 3 Linkin Park songs. I remember when this film came out, I was listening to it on loop. I was listening to New Divide on loop with the second movie, and Iridescent, I think, is a great song as well. But that'll do it for our review on Transformers 1. We now get onto Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. 2 years later, in 2009, summer hits, and we get another Michael Bay directed Transformers film. We'll go into your first time seeing it first, because I kind of have an embarrassing thing to bring up about this movie.
I saw this film once at the cinema. I didn't enjoy this film, I guess I could say. This is the film I hate the most of the series. My best memory of Transformers 2 is the stunning and phenomenal Transformers 2 PS3 game, which to this day is still one of the best multiplayer games I've ever played in my life. The fact I have fonder memories of a game for a film than the film says a lot about the film itself.
Is this the part where I have to go into my tale of watching okay, right. Full disclosure, I hate this movie now, 2017. I know all its problems. I know why people hate it. When this came out in 2009, I did see this movie 4 times at the cinema. Yeah, that's right, 4 times. And if I had found my DVD, I'd prove that, because I kept all my ticket stubs for it and put it in my DVD case. What can I say? I had many friends. Many of my friends don't get on with each other and all wanted to see the film separately. Now, the attitude I had at the first time, I think I still had that attachment to the first movie, and I was kind of convincing myself that I wanted to like this one too. And I will speak as I find. There are some great moments in this film with the Transformers. I know we'll talk about the action later, I guess, if we are going with the same structure, but I'll just say it now. The forest fight with Optimus, Megatron, Starscream, and the helicopter one that isn't Blackout, I thought that was absolutely stunning. That is what I wanted to see in the first film. They kind of shied away from the big epic fight with Megatron and Optimus in the other one. We get it with this one. I love the new design of Megatron. That was classic Transformers stuff that I wanted to see. And actually, before going into this film, Michael Bay kind of convinced everyone. He was saying, you're going to see the Transformers a lot more in this one. They're going to have much more of a focus than they did in the first movie. It's going to be darker. And I think he said that for every single one that's come out. And the only reason that there's more Transformers in this film is because it's like, what, half hour, 40 minutes longer than the previous one. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be in this movie. And I guess what we need to say as well is that this film came out around the writer's strike, I think, or it was made during the writer's strike, and oh boy, can you tell. I know that the other scripts aren't very good either, but this one definitely suffers. But yes, I did see this movie 4 times. There are some Transformers action scenes that I do like in it. I like some of the new characters, again, although they don't get much development. But this movie is a pretty big shitstorm in hindsight. So Everyone's unsubscribed now. Everyone hates me. Leave the hate comments, whatever you need to do. So yeah, I guess we could jump right into characters again. So we'll repeat with Sam Witwicky. We've already really talked about him, but in this one, the big story is that he's just going off to college and he's trying to be a regular kid and break away from the whole Transformers side of his life.
Yeah, and I guess that's it.
Apparently, it has and always has been his destiny to find this matrix of leadership and bring back Optimus Prime.
This film was just terrible. I mean, yes, people say that about the others, but I liked what they did in the first film, and college was obviously a natural progression. In the second one, the government paid for it, blah, blah, blah. He's still with Megan Fox, blah, blah, blah. Just show us Megatron coming back. Okay, this makes me sound like someone that's bitten. Yes, I don't like this film, but I was just so bored, and they were trying to introduce too much with the Terminator lady, with his horrible roommate who you wanted to die that didn't die, with Mudflap and Skids. Go back to the very basics of that first film. Have your core group, have the core group of heroes, villains, and have them fight. Do something good enough. Okay, there's that shard of the Allspark that does come into it. I like that tying together arc, but the whole uni subplot was just pointless and pathetic. They didn't need it. This kid's got a Transformer. He doesn't want to go to college. He saved the world. And in the next film, he gets like a free degree anyway, so what did it matter anyway?
Yeah, he like shakes hands with a bomber or something, doesn't he? Doesn't he have a picture of that, if I remember right?
Contextual.
There are so many like plot holes and inconsistency with this movie, way too many to go into. But like the whole thing with Shia LaBeouf, and he kind of does this in the third one, more so in the third one. He always has like this woe is me attitude, like, oh, you know, I saved the world, but I want to do more than that. I want to be me. And it's like, dude, you've got a hot girlfriend. You've got you've got the dream car that's a Transformer that can do anything for you. You know, you're caught up in this whole thing. You've saved the world. What more do you want? So he just really kind of pisses me off in this movie. He has these moments as well where he's basically seeing visions because he touched the Allspark in the first movie. And he's having these weird cryptic Cybertronium letters in his head. And he has this moment where it's one of the worst scenes in the film, where he goes to the front of the lecture hall and he's kind of tweaking out and he's freaking out. And there's like, I know there's loads of GIFs on the internet of Shia LaBeouf in that scene. Yeah, and the whole thing with the Terminatrix woman that's trying to get him, she has plenty of opportunities to kill him. There's the whole scene where she meets him in the party, where she's in the car alone with him, and she's trying to get him alone. She gets him alone many times. She's a goddamn Decepticon, for God's sake, with guns and cannons and all things like that. She had many times to kill him. Doesn't. And also the question of her being in there is like, well, why don't they disguise themselves like that all the time? It'd be like the ultimate T-1000 bad guy going after you. They blend in with anyone. You don't know who they are on the street until they get you, and then boom, you're dead. So and I think actually in the cartoon they did get to the stage where Decepticons were disguised as humans. I can't remember. I think that's towards the end of the series, so I might be wrong about that. But I don't know. It's just so questionable. And yeah, the whole film's just kind of a mess. It goes on for so long. It feels so meandering as well when they're trying to get to Egypt. And even when they're in Egypt, and the story itself, you could sum up in about an hour or like an hour and 20. It didn't need to be 2 hours 40, 2 hours 50, however long it is.
No, and I don't feel that this film takes the franchise in a direction either. You know, not a sequel doesn't have to be dark and brooding. A sequel doesn't have to be a remake of the previous film, but a sequel needs to take the franchise in a new direction to expand upon. And I feel this doesn't do anything with that. And Transformers 3, I feel it does because of the events that happen, which we'll get to that later. Transformers 4 is obviously a soft reboot. 5, they're clearly taking a new direction with the whole history angle and everything else that, you know, the cinematic universe. That's a new direction. There's nothing new in Transformers 2 at all. And yes, it's only been one film, but nothing in this sticks with the film later on. You know, except Agent Simmons getting a promotion, there is no outcome to the events of this film in the future films. And that I do not like, but I didn't like to, so I'm not fussed. Whereas 3 leads to Transformers being ousted, which leads to Transformers 4. And we don't know how Transformers 4 ties into 5 yet, but we know Optimus Prime's on a spaceship and is going to turn evil. This is nothing. And it's just pointless.
Well, you said, like, I mean, I don't want to go to 5 now because I haven't seen 5, although I can pretty much predict how it's probably going to go. But you said it's doing something new with the history angle. I don't actually think it is. I think all these movies after the first one, they're just kind of longer carbon copies of that original movie, because the whole history angle and that Transformers have always been a part of our history has been in all of these movies so far. With the first movie, you had the whole Arctic expedition and that Megatron had crashed there. Fair enough, you can chalk that to as part of the story. The second one, you've got the whole pyramids and everything like that, and the opening with the Fallen, for example, when you've got Primeval Man, for example. The next one, you've got the moon landing. The fourth one, you've got the dinosaurs and the extinction and the wiping out of the dinosaurs. And then this fifth one, you've got King Arthur and World War. So that history aspect's always been part of these films.
I mean it in the sense that, with this film, this history angle is tied into it so much. This is for their cinematic universe. Mm-hmm. Where, okay, they might not make a Transformers from the medieval ages or World War II, but the get-go from Transformers 5 has been, this is starting the Transformers cinematic universe. And that's why the focus on the Transformers 3 I loves with the history stuff. We'll get to that. Transformers 4 wasn't about the dinosaurs in the trailers, the build-ups, but this is the Transformers film where everything has been on that history. And I completely get what you mean with the history angles of the previous ones, which is, I love that with these films. But this is taking the fifth film is taking that franchise to a new direction. And obviously we haven't seen it yet, so we don't know to be sure. But if they're doing this cinematic universe, then that there's going to be plot points said which will relate to another film, or the ending is going to be done in a way for, spin-offs to happen, this, that, and the other. If that feels not necessarily fresh, but that feels it's doing a sequel thing and taking it somewhere new. 3 took it somewhere new with Chicago, Transformers taking over, and blah, blah, blah. Whereas 2, there felt nothing about it that's had any resonating, long-serving factor into this franchise. That if you look at every Transformers film, 2 is the one where it hasn't tied into anything that came after.
Yeah, I guess you can say that, definitely. And I mean, as I said, really the only things that I like in this film are some very select scenes with the Transformers, because, I mean, if you look at the human characters, again, there's nothing to say about Megan Fox. She is there for eye candy. That's it. Nothing more to be said. Even the Dominatrix Decepticon, for example, she's there for eye candy too. And then the new characters like Leo, he's there as a comic relief character in a film that already has about 7, 8, or 9 comic relief characters too. He's so annoying. The comedy in this, I'd say the writing is definitely the worst in this film, or maybe the third one. I know we disagree on the third one, which we'll get onto. But you've got scenes where you've got dogs fucking. You've got Leo character tasering himself in the balls. You've got giant swinging Decepticon testicles. All these kind of things where I'm watching it going, why is this in the movie? And I guess the worst example of the comic relief in this, if we're going to jump onto the Transformers quickly, is Skids and Mudflaps, who are the big new introduction as into part of the Autobot side in terms of the Transformers. They get more screen time than Optimus Prime in this film. Hell, they probably even get more screen time than Bumblebee. I don't even know. I don't know what Michael Bay was thinking by introducing these characters. I think one of them is voiced by Tom Kenny, who's the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants. I don't blame him. He's given the direction. He's given the lines to read. It's not his fault. He showed up for work. He was told what voice to do, and he did it, and he got paid for it. Fair play. But these characters are... Well, the whole racist thing, that just goes hand in hand with this. Like, there is no two ways about it. That it's complete stereotype, the characters of Skids and Mudflap.
Yeah, and they're the most obvious stereotype. I mean, yes, there's a lot of obvious stereotypes in these films, but the golden tooth, the dodgy ears, the popping out eyes.
They can't read. They're completely illiterate.
Being called Mudflap and Skids as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're the epitome of that low point of this franchise and the Michael Bay stuff that people hate. It's fine, people hate these films. I don't get triggered by people that say they hate them. I'm not a DC fanboy. I completely respect opinions, and they are right a lot of the times. These are minus films, but then you get to stages where it's like this, was like, come on, just cut to someone else that's more intriguing. Considering one film ago, you had someone like Blackout or Scorponok murdering loads of people in a row. In this, can anyone really, except when they go and bring Megatron back, can anyone remember like any half remarkable attacks that are memorable? I struggle to recall scenes from this, except the weird Transformer tail lady Terminator thing
with a tongue on it, and
it's just
it's shit.
The first one has the moments. The second one doesn't. I know there's a scene you love. We'll get to that later. The third one to me has moments. The fourth one has like maybe one, if that. This one just to me has nothing.
Mm. Well, I mean, you talked about the attacks of the Decepticons. You had a perfect time to do it in this film because there's a scene where the Decepticons essentially take over every city of the world. Once Megatron rises, he says to, like, I think Soundwave sends a signal across the world, doesn't he? And they all kind of like come out of hiding. And even like at the end, there's a moment when they're in Egypt where you've got a collection of all the characters I want to see die a horrible, slow death collected in one spot, and there's the perfect opportunity for like a stray like bomb to go off or a Decepticon to show up and just wipe them out. And it never happens. And there's a scene with Skids and Mudflaps where you're just willing them to die, and Devastator shows up. It's the perfect opportunity to do it. One gets pulled into the gears. He should be churned up out of the movie. And then he punches his way out and he says like Kung Fu Grip or something. It's this, and then they're back. There's a scene where you just want Leo, Shia LaBeouf, Megan Fox, even John Turturro. I know you like him, and I know he has his moments, but you want them all to die. And then to cap it all off, they randomly bring back Sam's parents into the Egypt conflict, and there's no reason for them to be there at all. And there's one of the most cheesiest moments in the film where you've got Sam Witwicky's dad, and he's trying to be like this really emotional, no, we're all got to stay together. You're not leaving me. You're my son. I love you. And it's just, I don't give a shit about this. Just get to the Transformers. That's why I'm watching a Transformers movie, you know?
Yeah, and I forgot about the parents being in that final fight. Again, forget, and Transformers 2 is a lot in common. Then you've got the Fallen. I mean,
oh god, talk about forgettable villains.
This is called Revenge of the Fallen.
What's he revenging?
Precisely. I was waiting on you to answer that for me, because judging from what I've been told over the years, I saw at school they used to love Transformers, and the Fallen has a bit of a rep. And okay, they went and got a Transformer villain that wasn't Megatron that could maybe lead a film, and they try and do the whole Megatron that you get in the first one of building up this guy, but the build-up has no consequence because Megatron's back and he's so much better. And the Fallen, I love that. Okay, the Egypt stuff, the history, yeah, hooray. The Mummy did that recently, and they didn't do it as bad as this did. Just what a waste. There's nothing he's revenging. It's just a bit of fear. It's like, okay, let's just cash in, and I don't even know where to begin talking about this film, in honesty.
Don't they even go to like the same location from Indiana Jones' Last Crusade? It's I know it's got like
a
famous name. You know, like the bit with the pillars where they shoot out the wall and they find the tomb
of
the Primes.
I
swear that's the place from Last Crusade. I think it's the place from Last Crusade, if I remember rightly.
And it's magically in the wall the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hooray.
And then it all turns to dust because it's not the right moment. He's not destined to bring back Optimus Prime at that moment. Should we talk about Optimus Prime then? Because
yeah, I guess he's a key part of this.
He's a key part of it, despite being in only like 2, maybe 3 scenes. So one of the scenes that I do love in this movie is the opening scene in Shanghai, with the exception of Skids and Mudflaps, when it cuts them as an ice cream truck, and he says like, "Any Decepticons better get ready for an ass whooping. I knew we were in dangerous territory." But besides that, we get introduced to Sideswipe, who is a cool design, and he has a cool moment. That's all I can really say. But Optimus Prime, you know he's going to show up. You know he's going to be the last one to deploy it. As you said, he's like the Superman character. He's the one that has to save the day. He's airdropped out of the ship. The camera follows him down. It plays the Autobots theme. The parachutes are a little hokey with the Autobot logo on, I'll give you that. But then he transforms. And I know I'm sounding like an absolute fanboy now, but the bit where he jumped, it was all in all the trailers, where he slow-mo jumps off the highway onto the wheel. I don't know. I want to see shit like that in a Transformers movie. That's the stuff I like. I mean, I'd like more character with the Transformers, obviously, but if you're going purely on the action, that's the kind of Transformers action I want to see. I mentioned about the forest fight as well, and it genuinely did shock me that they killed Optimus Prime off there. I knew he was going to come back. I knew that they wouldn't kill him off there, because even the TV show as well, once they killed him in the movie, they brought him back right after because people loved Optimus Prime. But then he's just kind of out of the movie, and you're really just waiting for him to come back. And eventually he does, once he combines with the parts of Jetfire. I like that design. It kind of turns into just like God mode, though, at the end. It's like you're playing a video game with cheats on, and everything's just kind of thrown to the wayside. Megatron's just discarded, which is fine. But then you have the Fallen as well, who's a villain that you bigged up that the goddamn film's named after. And he just really doesn't do anything. It's severely underwhelming. We don't really get many scenes of the Fallen himself. We don't know much about his history. You know, what the Primes did to him. He just kind of says that he was part of the Primes and they betrayed him. How did they betray him? Why did they betray him? This is stuff in the story that we should be knowing and we don't see. But in terms of Optimus Prime himself, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with them killing him off. because it is a great moment at the end when he does get the Matrix back. Oh, that's another thing with the Matrix. I know I'm kind of all over the place. We need to talk about the whole robot heaven thing, because that's a thing that a lot of people bring up that pisses them off with this movie.
I can't even remember of robot heaven. No, wait, it's when Sam dies and someone speaks to him.
Yeah. He sees all the primes in heaven. He goes to robot heaven, essentially, and then they give him back his life because he was destined to save Optimus Prime, their last descendant. So I guess once he's fulfilled his destiny, we don't need him in the third movie, right? Because he's kind of served his purpose. But
it's just again stupid.
One thing to say about go on, sorry.
One thing to say about Optimus Prime.
Yeah,
I feel that they should have done the death in the third film. It's too soon. He's been in one film. Don't come straight away. You need that build up. Give him a second.
It is like
film.
The Superman thing, isn't it? With Batman v Superman, it's too soon. Give it time.
Yeah. Especially with Batman v Superman, there's gonna be like 3 more films, so he was even more stupid. But Optimus Prime should have gone in the third film, especially with the story. We'll get to that later, but obviously it's a darker story than 2 is. But it was a good scene the way he died, but the robot heaven stuff, it's all just nonsense, and I'm happy they never went back to it in the future films.
And even like another plot hole, like the whole crux of the film is that they're having to travel to find the Matrix of Leadership, which is a spark that will bring Optimus Prime back to life. Well, I think this was done on like one of the His He videos as well, but they had the little fragment of the Allspark the whole time. Why didn't they just use that? Because seemingly that can bring anything back to life. So as soon as you start thinking about this movie, the entire film falls apart. Even the ending action sequence in Egypt, we've seen a battle in the desert before with Scorponok. So even just like visually, nothing very interesting is done. What other characters can talk about? There's Jetfire as well, who's kind of like the geriatric robot, very different from the animated character and how they find his character in that. I think that the character in the animated show is even given like a 2-episode arc as well. He's a really cool character in this. I can't stand him. I hate him. And this goes back to like the design of the Transformers themselves. They just look really ugly. It's like what I feel when I watch the Michael Bay produced TMNT movies. I've never really watched those, but in terms of the character designs, they just look disgusting to look at, the CGI, and that's kind of what I feel with most of the robot designs in this film. And Jetfire is probably the biggest offender of that, in my opinion.
I don't think they're ugly. I love the Transformers designs, but Jetfire's, I don't like Jetfire. It was cool seeing the whole, like, oh, he was a Decepticon and now he's an Autobot. It's like, okay, we know he's old. Does he really need to be is it the History Museum he's at or something?
Yeah, it's the, oh God, what is it? The Plane Museum, isn't it?
Something like that. And it's just, oh, we get it. He's old. And he's got a walking stick and, and then he just randomly sacrificed himself for Optimus Prime. If he couldn't be any more of a John Cena, then that completes it there and then. I thought he was a pointless character. Again, someone that never saw the originals, this isn't doing anything to make you want to go back and watch them. And maybe, well, that makes me sound harsh, but Justin says maybe that's a criticism of Michael Bay as well, because it's been badly done into this film. But yeah, I guess that is a criticism, isn't it? Let's be honest.
I think if I remember rightly, I'm going to have to watch the animated things again, but if I remember rightly, he's kind of like an Iron Giant character where, you know how Iron Giant has those moments where his eyes go red and he's evil. The Decepticons get to him first, and they kind of convince him to join part of their gang that he was a Decepticon, but when he sees like all the horrible things that the Decepticons are doing, then he switches sides to the Autobots, and then he carries on with the Autobots. Something similar to that would have been nice for the character, but again, this is Michael Bay, and he doesn't really like the old Transformers things. You get a few other Autobots as well in the film, like Jolt, who doesn't say anything, who's just kind of there. I've mentioned the Wheelie character, the John Kenny one. He's just equally as annoying as Skids and Mudflaps. Decepticons. One thing I did want to mention about Megatron, I guess I should have mentioned this in the first movie, they did change his design. In the first movie, he's a jet. In this one, he's a Cybertronian tank, I guess.
I love the tank.
Yeah, same here. One of the, like the legs as well. He's got like the treads, hasn't he, off the tank? It's a really cool design. I think this is my favorite design of Megatron out of all the films. But in the animated series, he basically just transforms into a blaster, and it kind of levitates and shoots. And it's really dumb, especially of a robot that size. And I think that when Michael Bay was doing the size of the Transformers, he wanted it to be in relation to the vehicle that they are, and I think that was a fair choice. Change it into a jet because all the Decepticons do fly anyway in the series. This one, you do get a bit more of that banter between Megatron and Starscream, though. Especially, it's only really one scene, I suppose, a little bit towards the end. But when he's on the rooftop and Megatron's basically cussing out Starscream for not being able to hunt down and track the humans, and I think he grabs his head, like face plants him into the ground, and like steps on his throat and crushes him with his tank treads. That's the kind of stuff I want to see. That's the stuff that links back. Hugo Weaving plays it fantastically, and I don't know the guy who does the voice of Starscream, but that works for me. That's the kind of very few moments in this film that do work for me.
Yeah, it's always good seeing the, not banter between them, but the authority rankings of the Decepticons. You know, they're bad guys, they're going to turn on each other eventually. And it's the kind of build-up. I mean, I haven't seen the original animated series, but after I did watch the first Transformers film, I did watch an animated series at the time on TV because I got hooked onto it.
There's been so many across.
Yeah, let's say I couldn't ever tell you what it was called, but I know the lead character was called Sam. But for all I know, Sam's been in every single iteration of him. But no, I like Starscream got a bit more to do in this because he is essentially leading the Decepticons while Megatron's destroyed as well.
Mm-hmm. And I like the ending as well, where when Megatron's getting absolutely beaten by Optimus, he kind of I think he like coughs out something, doesn't he? Like blood, I guess, is the equivalent, and he just shouts for Starscream. That's a classic Megatron thing to do. Thinks he's a big shot, thinks he can do it, and then when he's in the shit, he always calls for Starscream. And the ending as well, some people would say absolutely sequel bait. We knew we were going to get a sequel to this anyway, but where, Starscream plays the coward and he says, not to call you a coward, Master, but sometimes cowards do survive. And Megatron says, this isn't over, and they fly off. Classic end of every episode of Transformers. Love that stuff. The one thing I really hated with the Decepticons more than anything in this was the treatment of Soundwave. Now, Soundwave in this movie is the giant satellite dish, which Soundwave never was. He was a giant tape deck, essentially, which I understand you can't do that because that was just like a classic 80s thing. He was a boombox with the cassette tapes. But his voice was arguably one of the most iconic things in that original series. He had this weird robotic vocoder kind of voice. It was easily identifiable. He had a really distinctive look as well. Completely wasted in this movie. We do see Ravage, though, which is almost, it's a perfect design. It looks like a tiger. It looks like a kind of big cat, which is what Ravage did. I liked that stuff, and we do get Laserbeak in the next movie. Soundwave was a missed opportunity in this movie. I guess he was the third in command to the Decepticons. He was the closest ally of Megatron, and the voice was what carried the character for me. So to see him just as a kind of a satellite dish, essentially, with nothing much to do, didn't really get stuck in with the action. That did kind of break my heart watching this movie. But that's me as a fan of the original,
I just remember him as a giant dish that I think they reused the same shots in the next film as well.
Yeah, well, actually, no. In the third film, he does show up, and he's a vehicle this time. He's the one that, when Patrick Dempsey's character throws Sam and Carly, and it kind of transforms in the outside that castle thing. Do you remember that bit in the third movie?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yes. He's in a sports car now.
No prisoners, only trophies. The bit where he's about to kill Bumblebee. That was him in that movie. It may as well be a different character, different voice, different look. There's no continuity between these films at all in terms of designs, really. CGI action we've talked about. Music. I'm going to repeat myself for all these. Steve Jablonsky, solid score. Introduces a new theme for Optimus Prime, which continues in all the other movies. Yeah, and New Divide I mentioned as well. I do like that song still.
Yeah, I felt more of what I've done was on Linkin Park. I used to be a big Linkin Park fan. What I've done was on their album at the time, and it wasn't specifically done for Transformers, but it was perfect for it. But New Divide was specifically recorded for Transformers 2, which I do like because you get more of that Transformer-y music sound in it.
And they do use that song throughout the movie as well, like they do with Iridescent. I think Iridescent actually full-on plays in the middle of the movie, doesn't it, when they get to Chicago. Another bit, and I think it was for this movie, an music artist called Stan Bush, who to me is the voice of Transformers. He does the song "You've Got the Touch." I don't know if you've heard that from the animated Transformers. If not, you will see it tonight or tomorrow whenever you do see the animated movie. It's a very cheesy 80s song that's usually tied to Transformers. He did actually re-record a modernized version for the use in this film, and I think Michael Bay turned it down and said, no, we don't like it. That kind of really annoyed me because I would have loved to have heard that song in the credits. Maybe you didn't want to combo break the Linkin Park trio of songs that come out. But I would have liked to have heard Stan Bush or some kind of aspect or tie into that original that came before, even if it was modernized. That's the last bit of trivia I think I know about too. I've said everything on Revenge of the Fallen. It's more moments for me, as you said. The film itself is an absolute piece of shit. I regret seeing it 4 times at the cinema, but there are some moments with Optimus Prime that I do like, and there are more qualities of that classic Transformer stuff, like with Megatron, Starscream, as I mentioned, that is in this film, which is what I think I appreciated more in this film, more so than the first one or even any of the other ones that have come after it.
I think it's a piece of shit. This is the one I've gone back to the least. Didn't like it at the cinema. Didn't like it at home. I don't know why I bought them all. I think it was more the OCD completionist in me. But it's a Transformers film that I do not want to ever see again.
Mm-hmm. Now,
but the game was amazing. Let's never forget the game.
All the games are solid. All the games are solid.
This was the peak. Mm-hmm. Multiplayer, 6v6, hit Autobots v Decepticons, pick a Transformer, you could grapple buildings, you could fly, you could be a tank. It was the absolute shit. What an amazing game. I wish I had a PS3, and the servers are probably down. I wish if people played it, I would probably go back and play it. It was an amazing game.
Mm-hmm. One of the fun things was just like as Starscream or something, and just like flying around, just doing your own thing. Love that stuff. And then we get to, I believe, 2011, wasn't it?
Yep, Transformers 3.
Dark of the Moon. Kick us off on this one, because
I was so hyped for this. It was a combination of the trailers, not necessarily the previous film, but Transformers as a whole. I had watched an animated series I was a bit more not with it with film. I was 16. I was just finishing year 11. So there's the whole, you know, when I finished year 6, going into secondary school, year 7, Transformers 1, and obviously finishing secondary school is going to be Transformers 3. At the time, I thought the final Transformers film.
Same, yeah.
I remember watching it on the release day of some mates. We went actually after school. No one ever goes to the cinema after school on a weekday. That said everything you need to know. And I loved it. And then 1 week later, it was my birthday. I went to the IMAX for the second time in my life. And you know what? Actually, this is going to be an MP3 review, so I can't actually really go into it. I still have the ticket of my birthday, 9th of July 2011, Transformers Dark of the Moon 3D at the IMAX Birmingham. My gosh, this changed the game. I've seen Tron Legacy at IMAX. That was stunning. That was my first IMAX film. This was as good, probably actually better, because it's the first time where the 3D had obviously been filmed properly in 3D during the 3D gimmick. Transformers, giant robots fighting each other in IMAX. It was absolutely wonderful, and I absolutely loved it. And I've gone back. I saw 4 at IMAX. I'm going to see 5 at IMAX. This is a franchise built for IMAX. Take away Christopher Nolan, then Transformer films are probably the IMAX to see. Doesn't matter about the quality of the film if they're filmed on IMAX 3D and the whole giant robots fighting around, you know, these beautiful locations. It's like the other. They're perfect for IMAX, but a very fond memories of 3, and I absolutely loved it. The game wasn't as good as 2. It was more of a prequel game, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless, and it had a decent story. But I love Transformers 3. I go back to it. It's my favourite one of the lot. They do a lot more. They expand on it. They actually get the bad guys kind of winning for once. Ironically, I'm not the biggest fan of Sentinel Prime, but I still love the third one. It's very odd.
Right, on the flip side, now I'm going to echo everything the opposite to you. Now, I didn't see this in IMAX, and will say I've still never been to an IMAX, although you tried to convince me to go to the last night. I'm not doing it. I'm sorry. I can't physically do it. Okay, so Transformers 3. I, like you, thought it was going to be the last one of the trilogy, because it's weird how our minds work. Whenever we have 2 films, we always think, like, you know, it's going to cap off a trilogy.
Back then as well.
Yeah, and I guess you could argue that it has in some way. I know that they're carrying on the story of what happened to Cybertron in this movie in the 5th one, but 4 very much has kind of established a new trilogy for this film. I hated every single second of this movie. It's a film that I always chalk up to one of the worst cinema-going experiences of my life. And this is a film, I think I've said before, that I actually almost got kicked out of, because I was that annoying fanboy that wouldn't shut up the entire way through the movie. I couldn't believe the train wreck I was seeing, or what I was witnessing. The whole 3 hours of it as well. It's ridiculously long, this film. every single stupid joke, every single offensive transformer, every single mistreatment of a character or planet or whatever happened to be, I was just shouting at the screen like, what the fuck am I watching? And people were so invested in this movie. I didn't understand it. This is one thing. Not only do, when I go and see a Transformers movie, do I have to wrestle against my own sanity with the film itself, it's the people in there that think this is God's gift to humanity. The second one got applause. The third one got applause when I went. And nothing makes me want to just like torch the fucking place more when that happens. People were turning around. People were giving me death stares. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, there's a scene in this movie, for example, where all the Autobots load onto this rocket and say, like, we're going away from Earth. The humans don't want us here. We're flying away. Starscream shoots it down. And you have this whole moment where you think, oh, all the Autobots are dead. Everyone in the cinema was so invested in that moment and thought all their heroes had died, despite all the trailers showing a giant action scene involving all of our heroes that hadn't happened yet. Shit like that was really just pissing me off. I couldn't believe that people were eating this film up. So that's kind of my thoughts on Transformers 3. What I'll say is, like, there's no real moments in this film like the second one had where I went like, oh, that's a cool moment. This one I was just bored. The action went on way too long. And the whole treatment of Cybertron at the end, especially because at the time I thought this was going to be the end of a trilogy, really pissed me off. And I'll get into that later because we need to talk about the characters first. There's no point for Shia LaBeouf to be in this movie. No point at all. You can literally remove all of his scenes and the plot wouldn't change at all. Like, we pick it up and he's, you know, we see montages of him in job interviews with John Malkovich. Do we need this? Is this part of the story? No. No, it's not. We just need the Transformers. That's all the film is about. It's about Transformers on the Dark of the Moon, coming to Earth and wanting to take over the world. Autobots have to stop them. That's the story. Where does Shia LaBeouf go into, like, what is it, like a red and yellow colored floor, different floor? It's weird. It's so weird. I don't know. Help me out with this. I don't even know where to go on this. I'm straying.
You said there was no moments. Sorry to interrupt. The opening scenes of the moon were absolutely wow. Even before the moon, the Cybertron action scene was absolutely phenomenal. And you cannot kid yourself and say that you love that scene, because especially if you love the animated stuff, the people that despise these films all love that opening 5 minutes. And it was a great scene, especially in IMAX, so I'm going to now keep saying for the next 2 reviews. Then you get the actual moon stuff, which I love. Okay, in first film, he crashes into ice, he gets frozen, Antarctic, hooray. Second one, pyramids, hooray. That's history as such. But when it's modern history, when it's stuff that's so relevant, like Man on the Moon, because you know who was on the moon. We know them by name. And obviously one of them's actually in this film. I forgot. It's a big deal, and you know it happened in real life that they lost contact for a couple of minutes. To echo a story idea around that, I love the little sad things like that. But it was a stunning scene of them in space discovering the Transformers. That'd be Sentinel Prime. But then how it did tie into it later on with the whole warp gate and stuff like that. I loved how the history angle came into this, and really, I felt like it was new in this than it was in 1 and 2. Before, I despised that. We'll get to that with their history alternate take. But I loved what they did with third. I remember off the trailers, it was all the whole NASA stuff. Bay shot that very well, doesn't matter what people say. The opening scenes, I guess you can say. Then you're right, if he isn't really needed, but he is the protagonist of the trilogy. It felt like they were just trying to bring him out of retirement. You know, he's looking for jobs. John Malkovich, I absolutely love and adore him. I don't know why he was here, but that's like a lot of the Transformers film. Why is this person in this film? I don't know, but you know what? He's got some moments, and you know he's the whole weird karate man. He's in love with himself. I like the stupid things like that. Deep Wang, you know, cashing in. Your face says all the right symbols. You loved it too. I'm wafting on too much of the characters, but I can't tell you about a red and white floor, but also. This had a lot of Star Trek references, not just because of course, Spock voicing Sentinel Prime. I believe one of the writers was a massive Star Trek fanboy, I believe he said. Don't know if he worked on one of the films, I would doubt it.
Yeah. Just jumping back to that opening scene, you're right, I did love that scene. And actually, again, like Michael Bay did with Revenge of the Fallen, he says this one's going to take itself more seriously. It's going to be more focused on the Transformers. He's like a broken record at this point. It's going to be darker. Now, I sat down, I'm like, okay, Michael Bay, thrill me. Bring it on. The opening scene was fantastic. Seeing Cybertron again, seeing that Cybertron in war. It's only one really quick shot though, two spaceships chasing after each other. I'd love to see more of that. Hell, I'd love to see a movie based on that. That stuff was great. I loved all the backstory with the moon landing. The soundtrack in that scene as well is incredible. It's one of the best tracks off the whole thing. I think it's actually called Sentinel Prime. And then we hit the title, and I thought, fantastic. This is going to be the first properly, all the way through, good, serious, grounded Transformers movie. The very next shot. Can you tell me what the very next shot is after that opening title, George?
Oh, of course I can. It's Rosie. Rosie. I actually can't pronounce her surname. It's her running up the stairs.
It's her ass, more specifically, just center, full frame. We follow it just painstakingly up the staircase to the bedroom. Right there, I was like, you've lost. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's absolute eye candy. I'm not saying anything against that, but in terms of when I wanted an actual Transformers-focused film, I was like, okay, Michael Bay, you're going back to old ways here. You wish it was Megan Fox. She's not in this movie because... I'm guessing it was referring to these films or like behind the scenes. She compared him to Hitler, I think you said.
Yeah, she said working with Michael Bay is like working with Hitler. And then she was sacked. Probably more to do with Steven Spielberg than Michael Bay behind that sacking, because of course she did come back for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is basically a Michael Bay film. But she was gone, and I won't lie, that killed me. It killed a lot of teenage boys. To a lot of people, these films are built around her more than Sheila Booth. But you know, you've lost your second lead, and maybe she's irrelevant in terms of story arcs, but she was the lead character, and now she's not in it. And Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, like, she was a model. You know, she'd done some shoots, she'd done this, that, the other. I think Michael Bay directed her in some kind of promotional video. I think that's what I read.
Well, she's a Victoria's Secret model, isn't she? And actually, I think Victoria's Secret's one of the many product placements in the fourth movie that you see. I think there's like a symbol, like a sign, a poster or something where one of the Transformers goes through it. It's just that eye candy thing again. And I don't like Megan Fox. She's actually really bloody awful as an actress, but she was there in the first movie. She was there in the second movie. And it feels like this clearly was written for her character to be there. Then they had to kind of rework it afterwards for Rosie Huntington-Whiteley's character. It felt like Megan Fox needed to be there to at least complete this trilogy, because at the end of the second one, when Sam comes back to life, she says, like, I love you, all this, you know, all the typical stuff. Like, she's gone through all this stuff with him. I think she even says, like, do you really think after everything I've been with you, after everything I've been through with you, you know, would I just up and leave you? And then apparently she does, because I think one of the robots, I think it's like the little remote control car one, says like, oh yeah, she was an absolute bitch. Like, she just left. She just left him, which really seems out of character even for her. And I know they had to get rid of her some way, but I think there would probably be better ways to do it than that, maybe. Who else? You have Lennox in it again. You have Tyrese Gibson back in it again. There's not really much mention in there. You did mention John Malkovich, though. I love Malkovich. I can't stand him in this movie. Didn't need to be in this movie. I didn't need a scene with him. Like, doesn't like Bumblebee tickle him or something at one point?
He's cuddly. He did play Dorge after all in oh Christ, I forgot of Mice and Men. What's wrong with him being tickled? He might accidentally break Bumblebee's neck.
But this is what I mean with like the comedy in this film. I know you kind of like, even with films like Baywatch, for example, you like that kind of really zany, at times very crude.
So bad it's funny.
So bad it's funny kind of humor. There's a place for that with me. I mean, one of my favorite comedies is Norbit, for Christ's sake, or the scary movie films. Like, I love some dumb comedy, but I don't need it in my Transformers film, and I think that's what it's chalked up to. And Deep Wang, okay. We need to talk some Deep Wang here. Ken Jeong is a fantastic comedic actor. I watched Community last year, loved him in that. He was one of the best things in it. The humor in this film is so tone deaf. I mean, it's a film about Decepticons taking over. You see Decepticons full-on wiping people out in this, like vaporizing them in the street. It plays on all kinds of terrorist imagery. You have more callbacks to like 9/11 and stuff like that, which, you know, Michael Bay is, of course, trying to get across in the subtext. You even have like the whole Challenger explosion as well with a rocket. And then you have a scene like Deep Wang where basically the crux of the scene is you need the character of Deep Wang to get some information over to Shia LaBeouf. You could have him like in the corridor, just passing it over to him, really hush-hush. What do? He has to get him in a bathroom stall. He has to take off his pants, and he's wearing like this jock strap, and he has to pull the plans out of his crotch and like wipes it in Shia LaBeouf's face. Cuts to the outside. John Malkovich walks in and thinks that Kim Jong is fucking Shia LaBeouf in the bathroom stall. And then all of a sudden the comedy goes really dark and like Deep Wang like squares up to Malkovich. And like the whole tone changes. It's so weird. It's like I don't even know. Well, clearly Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orsi, sorry, like this is from the masterminds of them. I don't know where they think of this shit. I really don't. That's all I have to say.
It's because all in all, The Hangover 1 had just come out.
Yeah.
He was the best. Mr. Chow was absolutely amazing in the Hangover film, the first one. Mr. Chow is a centerpiece of Ken Jeong. And what I bring about Transformers is Jerry Wang. He suits it. Listen, I love him in this. I love Ken Jeong. He's amazing in Community. He can do comedy well. And I love the way he just slurps the straws. It doesn't suit Transformers, you're right, at all. But there's just that level of nonsense that these films have. I mean, these are films about giant robots that live inside of humans. Not inside, but on Earth. That would be a very depressing film to watch. And I love him in it. You know, he's technically integral to the story. If you don't like him, well, he gets annihilated by Laserbeak. He gets thrown out of a window, probably 50 floors down. So if you don't like him, then you at least get that ending going for him. And he has some funny lines. He's pointless and he's irrelevant to the film, but I don't mind him.
See, like, there's just so much you can cut out of this movie. Like, if I was editing this movie, I could get this film down to about half the time. I guarantee I could get this down to about 90 minutes if I tried. Other characters, John Turturro returns yet again.
He's amazing in this one. No,
one
John
funny
Turturro,
line. One funny line.
One funny line. The way he shouts "Dooch." That's any line's a funny line with him. Tell Megatron let's tango in full Matrix gear in slow mo running across. Him trying to sell his book in his mansion. He has some amazing. Get out of my house when they're trying to like pickpocket him. He is absolutely incredible in this film. Thank God he doesn't die. Yes, there's a stupid love plot which they didn't need, but John Turturro is amazing in this, and we have K2SO as the assistants. I've never seen that before. There's some very funny Russians. There is the Brent Man from Spider-Man 2 and 3, who is absolutely amazing in his short scenes. Exactly. There's all these throwbacks, and you know, Dutch is absolutely amazing. Let's be honest. Is Christ, I cannot be forget. Is he ever not amazing?
Alan Tudyk.
Alan Tudyk. I mean, he can play a chicken being strangled in Moana, and he still pulls it off.
See, here's the thing. I love Alan Tudyk. He is one of the best actors I know. He's so diverse of an actor as well. When I want diversity in terms of his roles, I don't want the character of Dutch because I hate Dutch in this. It comes right out of nowhere. And again, the tone deaf like quality of the character, and again, the stereotypical quality of the character. So he clearly plays a gay character. We know that. We know it as soon as he opens his mouth. And that's it. You can just leave it at that. But what does Michael Bay do? He has to really hammer it home. He has to put him in floral print suits. He has to be like, oh, I have a girlfriend. Oh, great. What's her name? India. It's like, we get it, Michael Bay. Just stop, forcing this thing on us. And then there's the scene where he just kind of snaps. He's like a mad dog, and it goes really dark, and it feels like I'm watching a completely different movie. It's just, the humor doesn't make much sense to me. It has no placement in the singing. It has no placement on the film in general to me, and that's why I don't like it. There's a scene where you think that Simmons might die in this film, where one of the Decepticons throws him out the back of a car, and you're like, oh, thank God they've got rid of him out of the film. Alas, no, he's then in a wheelchair, and he's still throughout the rest of the film. But Turturro does get one funny line in this movie, and I will admit that it's a funny line. It's when he's trying to get into like the Russian nightclub thing. He says, like, leave it to me, I've got this, knocks on the door. They open it for the password, and he goes, "Do svidaniya," and the guy just goes, "That means goodbye," slams it in his face, and he's like, shit, like, I've got this, just pays him off at the door. That was great. That was a funny joke, and more humor like that I'd be fine with in the Transformers movie. Everything else doesn't amount to anything. I really don't like it. Patrick Dempsey in this movie too, I guess, is probably our biggest antagonist in this film. Again, the action climax keeps focusing on him. He's this really arrogant, up himself car dealer, I think. He's really wealthy guy. He's trying to go for Shia LaBeouf's girlfriend. She's flirting with him. He's flirting with her. And then apparently his family made some kind of pact or oath to the Decepticons that they'd work with them and the Decepticons would help them make money throughout the ages. I think it's been a while since I've seen it, but it's something like that. And the whole ending just keeps getting derailed to focus on his character when it should be focused on Megatron at the forefront, really. And he even kind of takes a backseat in this movie to Leonard Nimoy's character of Sentinel Prime. But again, this is another reason I don't like this. Humans keep getting focused on way too much with this film.
I don't dislike him. He's someone. Well, you know, I don't like him. I don't dislike him. He's just so swammy. You know, he's going to get battered by the end of it, and you're just waiting for that thing to happen. And eventually, it does. It's nice to get like an evil human character for once. I guess that's nice to say, even though he's not that good at doing it. Obviously, that's bettered in the next film, which I will say that one of the few good things about that one. Oh god, I'm yawning. I would yawn for Transformers 2. No, Transformers 2 is amazing. It's just, yes, the humans, they're not the best of these films. However, I think this third film, it doesn't rely on the humans as much, because once the story really gets going with the Decepticons, the portals, whatever the hell they want to call it, that's when things really kick in and get fun. Especially when the Sentinel, sorry, I got his name wrong. The Sentinel storyline kicks into it.
And the storyline is actually taken from, I think, a 2 or 3 episode arc in the film where they want to essentially beam Cybertron to Earth, really close proximity. However, when it's happening in this film, nothing changes on Earth. Like, if a planet of that size was in the atmosphere, that would fuck with everything. And they even do that in the animated series, and it might not be completely accurate, but you've got volcanoes going off, you've got tidal waves happening, earthquakes happening left, right, and center. It feels like a judgment day, essentially, for Earth, because Cybertron's coming into our atmosphere. And there's loads of interesting things you could do with that. You could say that, you know, I think, doesn't even Sentinel Prime quote a line from Wrath of Khan, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, in this film, which was complete. I'm not even a Star Trek fan, and I was offended by that. But you could do an angle like that where you could say that, is it right for them to kill humans in order for, you know, the Cybertronians to continue, essentially? And you could have Optimus Prime having that dilemma, maybe, which looks like that might happen in this new movie, granted. But the whole treatment of Cybertron at the end is what really pissed me off in this movie. That was kind of the nail in the coffin. The first one was Megatron, how much of a backseat he took in this film. He just plays second bitch to absolutely everyone in this film. Even Rosie Huntington-Whiteley at one point towards the end, which really pissed me off. And, you know, it gears up for that final fight between Optimus Prime and Megatron. Sentinel Prime's kind of been taken care of for now, and then it's Megatron and Optimus, and you're waiting for it. This is the clash you wanted to see. You got a bit of it in the second one. You got even less of it in the first one. This is it. End of the trilogy. End it on a huge fight. And it's over in like 5 seconds. Optimus Prime just kind of gets his axe, rips his head, and then you get like a torrent of blood. It's like so graphic for a Transformers films. I don't know why that's in there. And ultimately, Bumblebee and like Optimus Prime kind of bring about the destruction of Cybertron by themselves. They sever that connective pillar, which kind of makes Cybertron implode. And the problem I had with it is that the Autobots and even the Decepticons' goal was to bring life back to that planet. They just had different ways and means of going about it. Their planet is destroyed, and no one gives a shit. I think Megatron just says, like, he just kind of goes like, no, and that's it. Optimus Prime doesn't care. He's just ruined his whole planet. His entire meaning of being on that planet Earth and his whole motive for doing anything has completely gone. Doesn't care. And it never comes up in the 4th movie either, but it looks like they're actually doing something with it in this 5th one. It might be a little too late. I think that was kind of the nail in the coffin for me with this first movie, which pissed me off the most. Was I know the second one might be a less of a movie in terms of how it was made than this movie, but in terms of its character and story treatment, that's what irked me the most with this one, more so than Revenge of the Fallen.
Yeah, this was my issue. I love Megatron. But with this, I feel that because they got that villain in Sentinel, they didn't want to take the limelight off him with the Prime connection. But I always thought Megatron was going to eventually, you know, come through, not save the day, but wipe them out before things got too late. But Sentinel did make it basically to the end. There was like a little bit of interference, but it wasn't major enough. But it was the whole him in the farm with like the towel, not towel around, Jesus Christ, not with the towel around his head, but more or less like wrapped up. He's a wasted, he's a loser, he's done and dusted. And, you know, the end was meant to be him redeeming himself, but no, that doesn't really happen. However, I did love the shot of him sitting in Abraham Lincoln's statue. I thought that was awesome. Did a lot better than Planet of the Apes did all them years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But he's wasted in this, and I'm hoping for a second chance in the new film.
That's one thing I never get with the whole transformation thing in these films is that they get wrecked in these films. Like, they get shot at, they get blown up, body parts come off, paint is just, scratched, absolutely beaten, blown up, scorched, everything like that. But when they transform back into their vehicle, they're completely fine. So I don't know why Megatron is still all let up. Like, surely he could transform and he'd be back to normal. Maybe the form resets. I don't know. It's never really explained. I mentioned Soundwaves in this film as a completely new character, really. Laserbeak I do really like. I thought that was a great modernization of design. I liked his voice. I like his character. And I like that he's kind of this despicable henchman. And he is going around and systematically murdering everyone. I thought that was really cool. And Starscream as well in this movie. I mean, they do kill a lot of the cast off in this movie. You kill Megatron off, you kill Sentinel Prime off, you kill Ironhide off, and you kill Starscream. So they've wiped out pretty much a big majority of the cast, especially characters that are tied so closely to the Transformers lore and history. It's a shame that Starscream's gone because we're no longer going to get that back and forth. But, I guess if this is another reason why it felt like it was gearing up for the end of the trilogy is that they were getting rid of characters to the degree that they were.
When Ironhide went, that leaves, I believe, Prime and Bumblebee, who I guess untouchable, left Ratchet, died in 4. Mm-hmm. Then you've got, essentially, the entirety of the end of this film, the entirety of the Decepticons are assumed dead.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
And this is why I thought it'd be the ending. Dark of the Moon, it sounds like it's the end of a trilogy. I think at the time they must have said it was like the end or something like that, because the way the build up, the way the Chicago got destroyed and stuff like that felt so end of trilogy that everything was ramped up to that final push, and it was, and then they come back in 4, rule it all.
Mm-hmm.
But the Laserbeak, I did love Laserbeak. I don't know much about him, but he was like this. There was a printer going around shooting people in offices. You see him. I guess I don't know if it's when he's first introduced, but it's certainly Megatron's first scene when there's some birds in the sky. It looks like the Lion King or Jungle Book, and then Laserbeak just shoots the wall and just flies down. I thought he looked really cool doing that. He was a really awesome villain.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I will say as well, I mean, we don't really... There's one action scene we need to talk about. They introduced the character of Shockwave, who is completely different to his animated character counterpart. For one, he doesn't really have a voice. I think he just says Prime. He's voiced by Frank Welker. They got him to literally record probably 2 lines for him. And it's the big mechanical worm that was just used in all of the trailers. That was the selling point. That was the action scene that everyone wanted to see. For me, it goes on too long. It gets really over the top. Some shots are impressively filmed, but again, it's the character of Shockwave that I wanted to see. I think he was always like the military tactician of the group of the Decepticons, and you never really get that. He just kind of shows up for a big action scrap, really, with the main characters in the building. It's not even with the Transformers.
Yeah, I did like. I like the worm scene. Oh, hello. Yep.
There we go.
I'm back. Sorry, brief interference. I did really like the worm scene. The way the tower was done. Awesome practical effects when they were sliding up and down the building. Practical to a degree, I guess you can say.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved that sort of like I said, this is a film with 3 parts. You've got the beginning, which finishes with them taking over Chicago. Then you've got the middle section, which is basically up to that final fight. I know the ending's a bit quicker.
They're just trying to get to the tower, aren't they, to do something? I think that's pretty much the entire act.
But I liked the whole squad. Everyone's running away. It felt like some kind of like modern sort of terrorist attack in the town. You've got the survivors going in. Everyone's going in one direction, but there's one car going to the other to go and get back and save the city. The only issue is that Sheila Booth's only going to get Carly again. That should have been. Mm-hmm. It would have made so much more sense if it had been Megan Fox's character. But obviously, what happened.
And especially when you end it as well, where he's essentially going to propose to her. This is the first movie we've seen her. There's nothing to her character. Had that have been Megan Fox, although, again, there's nothing to her character, there is that slight connection between the 2 other movies. The music, I'm going to be a broken record. It's great. It's probably... I think the soundtrack to the first movie is my favorite, but I think this would be a close second. I do like the Sentinel Prime theme. I do like all the music throughout the film. I like Iridescent as well, the Linkin Park song. I like how that feeds into the soundtrack. One real small criticism of the film as well, the editing in this one is the weirdest one for me. There's a lot of random cuts to black. It feels like you're watching a trailer for Transformers in a lot of scenes, and I don't understand the reasoning behind that. It was a really strange editing choice. Overall opinions for me on Transformers Dark of the Moon, it's my second to least favorite one out of the 4 so far. as I've said, I don't like the treatment of the characters. I think they neglect them the most in this film. There's no moments that stand out for me that wow me at all, and I don't like how they handled the whole Cybertron thing at the end. With this fifth one coming out, which I will watch, maybe it will make me see this film in a slightly different light, but I just have a problem with the humor. I have a problem with the human characters. There's so much stuff in this movie that could be removed at all. We didn't even talk about Frances McDormand's character, but do we even need to? She's a great actress. She's just completely wasted in this film in a thoroughly unlikable character. I've said everything. The only things I really like are the opening 10 minutes and Laserbeak. That's pretty much it for this film.
I love this film. This is my favorite of the trilogy. It was a nice way to wrap things up. There's some brilliant action. It's nice to see Decepticons winning for a change. And it just felt like the funnest. It didn't feel like the longest. Didn't feel as long as 4. Every time I've seen this since, it's come in 3 parts. And I've really enjoyed going back and watching this film. Yes, a lot of people disagree with me on that, but I love the third one. My running order of favourites goes 3, 1, 4, 2. But there's a big gap between 1 and 4.
Yeah. Right, I'm sure we both feel burnt out right now. We've talked 3 Transformers films.
Just over 2 hours, I think, so far.
Just over 2 hours. This might be one of our longest. It might almost break even with the actual. Yeah, we'll find out. So then we get to 2014 with Transformers: Age of Extinction, which is kind of a soft reboot of the franchise, I would say. We get an entire new cast, pretty much in terms of the human characters, and even really a new lineup of Autobots too. Background on this film, I didn't go and see this one at the theatre. I saw the first 3 in the cinema. After the fallout of the third film, I thought, I'm not going to pay money, because, I mean, ticket prices, even at this point, were expensive. And I was like, I'm not going to give my money towards this. I saw the trailers. I knew exactly what it was going to be like. So I waited until home video for this. When I did watch it, I think I had to watch it in about 4 or 5 sittings, because I was getting even more pissed off with this one than I did with the third one. I literally just had to pause it sometimes, go out of the room, take a few deep breaths, punch a wall, come back, continue. This one was really hard to sit through, especially considering I think this is the longest one, isn't it? I think this is pretty much 3 hours bang on the dot, which is ridiculous. You don't need a Lord of the Rings length film for Transformers any way you slice it. You really don't. I think this actually might be my least favourite out of all of them. I've only watched this film I think I've watched it 1.5 times. I don't think I've ever watched it 2 times all the way through. But there's less moments in this, even compared to 3, that I can really grab a hold of and say, that was a great Transformers moment. You could tell that Shia LaBeouf, you could tell he was burnt out even in the third one. Like, that was definitely going to be his last one. Even when you watch that, you could kind of gather that would be his last one. I think Mark Wahlberg is a better lead. He's kind of has a more likability to him as an actor, I would say, because I've just seen him in more stuff, I guess. But nevertheless, again, as it all boils down to these films, my biggest problem with this film are the human characters. And even actually most of the Transformers too in this one, surprisingly.
The fourth one. Opening day, IMAX. Nothing's changed.
Of course.
It was too long. Like, very rarely in a cinema can I feel like I'm missing out on time. I feel, I don't really look at the clock. I never get my phone out, but
I'd have been exhausted with this.
I was shattered. I was trying to get my watch in line of the screen, so when it'd be a bright scene, I would be able to see a reflection and get the time on my watch. And that's not a good sign. This film, it was too long. It was a soft reboot. I love Mark Wahlberg. Obviously, in between Transformers 3 and 4, there was Pain and Gain, which obviously started the Mark Wahlberg connection. That's why he brought him into the fourth one. It made sense to go for that. If you've had a younger actor for the first 3 films, you want a soft reboot, get the older actor, and it paid off for Mark Wahlberg. I like him. Don't like the daughter. Don't like the creepy pedo boyfriend. But Mark Wahlberg, I love. Just whatever film he's doing, he's just I can't do his voice. I wish I could do his voice, but he's like, hey man, what are you doing? Yeah. So it's that really, like, it's not high pitched. It's really nice. But it's Mark Wahlberg, and when he starts shouting, you just don't take him seriously. Someone that can shout. But obviously, Marky Mark was a thug once, and he's such a cool guy. But I loved him fighting Transformers. But this film, there's that twat from Deadpool in it as well. Who, when he got turned to stone, I was actually buzzing with that. That was a great moment. Stanley Tucci, he Tucci, but I always call him Tucci. It's funny. Yeah. It's just funny to call him Tucci in it. I don't mind him in this. He's like the arrogant prick with the money. I'm just literally breezing through the characters.
I think we need to at this point.
Yeah,
I think we
exactly.
need to wrap up.
It's a nice addition to the franchise. I guess he was the replacement of John Turturro. That's why I'm hoping they connect together in the new one because they're both in it. But human characters, anyone like Mark Wahlberg. The less said about the Irish pedo, the better. Romeo and Juliet, Lord Christ Almighty, that's dangerous territory. Kelsey Grammer, though. Kelsey Grammer is one of the best things about this film. He's
like in a different movie. He's like he's playing a character in like a Michael Mann thriller film, like Heat or something.
Yeah, he just wants to kill all the Transformers, and he's just a bad man from the get-go. Then you have the line of the year from his sidekick, which was "My face is my warrant." Just incredible.
See, I saw that guy from Lost. I saw that guy from Lost. He was in the final season of Lost as the Man in Black, and he was great in that. I really do like the actor. And as henchmen go, his opening shot, for example, this is pretty much how every character is introduced in this film. It's always the low-angle shot, someone getting out of like a black limousine, shades on, sunlight in the background, American flag billowing. And I do like his character in it. I don't like the way that he goes out of this movie, though. Doesn't he get like a ball thrown at his face and he falls out of a window or something? I can't even remember. Kelsey Grammer is by far the standout in this movie because he is completely in this film for ironic reasons, and I do like how he plays it like he is in a serious film. The one thing that I do like in this film is how it does connect with the previous film, and that they've established this order, and that they want to get rid of all the Transformers based on all the destruction, although they kind of did that in the third one anyway when they wanted to send the Autobots away as a distraction. But they keep putting the blame on the Autobots, saying, like, this is your fault. They're here because of you. You've caused all this. I'm like, this is the force that are fighting for your safety. Like, if they hadn't have done this, the apocalypse would have happened 4 times over before this point. Mark Wahlberg's fine, as I said. Hate the daughter character. Hate the boyfriend even more. And he's an actor that I don't actually mind. He was in a film called Sing Street, which was this small independent film that I watched last year. He was great in that. I think he was in Macbeth as well as Malcolm. I think he was fine in that. But yeah, that Romeo and Juliet laws is just dangerous territory, and why Michael Bay put that in the movie just terrifies me even more. Stanley Tucci is an actor that I absolutely love. Can't stand him in this movie. Again, it's that humor that doesn't need to be there. Pretty much all the human characters really don't need to be there. The Transformers themselves, though. Now, Optimus Prime is completely fine in this movie. Don't have a problem with Optimus Prime, although we did see this in a little bit of the second one, definitely a lot towards the third one, absolutely in this one. He is an absolute maniac with a gun in this film. He doesn't give a shit. He will blow people away. He'll even go so far as to kill humans in this one. Towards the end, when he just absolutely annihilates Kelsey Grammer's character. I can see some fans of Transformers being really against that. It's kind of, I think I compared it to the Superman thing, where Superman's like an all-good Boy Scout character that should never kill anyone. He will always find a way to go around it if he can. And he would never kill humans, even if they're bad. He'd never kill humans. I don't really have a problem with that, because seeing Optimus Prime as an absolute badass, that's fine with me. Bumblebee's really obnoxious in this movie too. I know I'm breezing, like you did with the humans, I'm breezing through it because we need to get done pretty quickly. But Bumblebee is the most not irritating, but just obnoxious out of all the films, I would say, in this one.
I can't actually remember Bumblebee in this one. With him, he's a character, I said before, I'm not his biggest fan. I'm a bit bored of him. He is someone that, okay, Sam was his owner. It was his, technically in the new universe, it's not his first human, because obviously the 80s, but there's that connection, whereas in this, Bumblebee just turns up, it's like, you're even more boring now, you're not connected to the leads. I like that Mark Wahlberg's a bit more connected to Prime than Sam Witwicky was. Again, I'm still not a big fan of Optimus Prime, but I like what they do with him at the end of him sending him off to space to go on a journey of some sort, eventually try and slowly tie away from Earth. Oh, but Transformers 5 is completely set on Earth. 5, yeah, it's the 5th one. God's sake, Jesus. Yeah. But no, the 4th one is just, I didn't mind it. I don't like it lots. I don't dislike it. Has it got any good scenes? I can't. I'm struggling to remember. It was so long. I did like Galvatron in his short cameo. No idea what's happening with that in the 5th film. I guess we'll find out. So there's better clarification on Thursday. It was a cool addition. I don't think anyone expected Galvatron to be in this film. I don't think it came out, but there was the new Transformer technology, which I did think looked really awesome. Makes them so OP though. But I was behind that. And I loved the Transformer that had like the sniper for a face. That was absolutely incredible.
Oh, lockdown.
And it was sad when Ratchet died, I will say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought they handled that really, really well, especially because he'd been in the first film. Didn't have much of a character, but you do remember him from the first film. Yeah, I'd say that was probably even more heartbreaking than Ironhide. Although I'd say Ironhide's death was a lot more graphic in terms of the thing that he just like rusted completely on camera, whereas Ratchet just kind of gets shot a bit. The new Autobots, though, we have the John Goodman robot, and as you said before we hit record, you may as well just refer to them by their voice actors in this one because they really don't have a character. You got John Goodman robot. He's kind of like a war veteran, like kind of Vietnam kind of Autobot that's just like chomping down on a cigar all the time. I can't stand his character. Again, like really obnoxious, irritating. Ken Watanabe is just completely racist again. He just refers to everyone as sensei. He speaks in like all these really sort of like metaphorical kung fu kind of, you know, karate. What's the word I'm looking for? Kind of, you know, like the mantras and everything they talk about. He basically just talks like that all the way through. You also have a new character called Crosshairs as well, who's voiced by John DiMaggio. Can't stand his character. So that's where at least the other ones I did like the core cast of the Autobots or the Decepticons, whatever it happened to be. I never had that with this movie. Even the Dinobots. I mean, the Dinobots were the posters on this. They were in the trailers the whole time. They only really show up in like the last 20 or minutes or so, and none of them have characters. Grimlock, the T-Rex in the animated series, has a very definable voice. He's kind of the no-brain muscle of the group, but he's funny. He's an endearing character, as indeed as all the Dinobots are. I don't like their designs in this. I really think they kind of all just like that's that gunmetal grey that kind of blend in with everything. They don't have a character. They just raw. That's not going to change with the fifth one at all. So I thought that was a big letdown. Lockdown, though, I did think was fantastic. Now, the whole thing when I said that Megatron was a gun, in the animated series, they made him a jet. I think if they had have done the whole gun thing, this would have been the way to do it. He was imposing. You could tell he was like a bounty hunter, I think, wasn't he? When we get on his ship, he's kind of got the dead bodies of Autobots that he's kind of got for money throughout the ages. And he's traveled across the galaxy to get Optimus Prime because I think he wants to take them back to the... the creators. I can't remember what they're called. It's the alien force that wipes out the dinosaurs, which we're going to see more in this new film coming out. And Galvatron as well was definitely the logical progression to go with Megatron, I think, because you'll see in the animated film tomorrow that Megatron, when he's wounded, is then given a new body by Unicron and becomes Galvatron, is actually voiced by Leonard Nimoy, and that's why they used him, although not as Galvatron in Dark of the Moon. They finally get Frank Welker to kind of reprise his role as the Megatron character in one guise or another, which was nice. I think his voice is fantastic. He doesn't really get many lines again because Galvatron really doesn't get many lines in this film. I thought it was a cool way to go about it. They modernize it. They don't have them getting the body or the henchman in the same way it does in the animated one, but I like where they went with it. I like this new technology, although the CGI on that kind of transformation sequence is absolutely horrible in every time I see it. I don't know if you thought that either.
What, on the little white diamonds?
Yeah,
ones?
well, like the new technology they've got. What is it?
I liked it.
What's the stupid name they have for it? They have like was it Transformium or so, what is it? They have like a really
it was just like an advert for beats, pills, guns, foods, and it was really weird. But that was their product placement scene.
It was almost like Unobtainium from Avatar in terms of being like a really shitty name for a new compound.
With Amium on the end.
Yeah,
I like it. I thought it looked kind of cool. It was a nice change. I love the classic Transformer design, but they probably felt like they had to do something new. And with Galvatron, he looked amazing, like all white, felt so different. This overpowered monster, and he kind of gets away. And I really hope to do something with that in the next one. But I didn't mind that effect. But what I will say before we forget, because we're flying through, moment of the film is when someone picks up an air conditioning unit and throws it at another character. The reason this is so amazing is because in real life, during filming, there's a big drama on the news that what happened when they were filming in China, obviously, as a production crew would do, they pay off all the local residents saying, we're going to have a bit of noise on this day, that day, here's a load of money, there you go, enjoy yourselves. Like 2 people kicked off saying they weren't getting paid enough, and they bought an air conditioning unit to the set and threw it at Michael Bay. And obviously, they got arrested, put in prison. And in retaliation, Michael Bay put a scene in his film of them throwing an air conditioning unit at someone. In this heat, I would be blessed if someone threw it at me. But yeah,
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Is that in the fight with
It's in the building, yeah, with Mark Wahlberg and the henchman, the warrant man. He throws an air conditioning unit at him. It's just great.
God, I don't even know what else to talk about this film. CGI action, nothing stands out for me at all. I don't like the highway chase. Is there even an opening action scene in this film? I don't think there is. And the entire one just kind of all merges into one for me. You've got the whole big machine that like sucks things up into the air and then drops it. I've seen that in pretty much like Man of Steel did it. Watchmen did it. So many things have that huge, like, you know, thing that sucks things into the air. Even Devastator, the second movie, had that power, so it wasn't anything new, really. And the music, I would say this is probably the weakest out of the 4 Steve Jablonsky soundtracks so far. There's not really any songs that I remember in this one like I did with the first 3. And the song as well, there was no Linkin Park in this one. It was an Imagine Dragons song called Battle Cry, I think it was called, that feeds into the film. Didn't really like that song either. So I don't really have much else to say on this film. It's probably my least favorite because it does abandon a lot of the characters and things that we had in the first 3. I really just kind of hate the main Autobots cast, and there's not really that many Decepticons to even talk about, really. The huge selling point of this film was the Dinobots, which I thought were thoroughly underwhelming, and I didn't like any of the human characters. Mark Wahlberg's fine. The product placement in this film is completely ridiculous as well. You have Victoria's Secret, you have Bud Light. I'm sure you have a lot more. You have Oreos as well. I think there's an Oreo bot in there. There's so many things. It just gets in the way of the movie, and I just want it to end. I want the pain to end right now, but I have the last night to attend in a couple of days' time. Hopefully it's better than this one. Hopefully it's somewhat tolerable. I don't think it will be, but I've said my piece on Transformers Age of Extinction.
It's not the best one. It's not the worst one, but only slightly less than being the worst one. It's a shame because I wish you could have took like Mark Wahlberg, put him on screen with Sheila Booth and some other things. I'm really hoping the next one's just a lot better than 4. 4 felt so weird, like a Pirates of the Caribbean 4. It's that soft reboot doesn't quite work. Keep a few good things from 4, put it in 5, see what happens. And let's hopefully hope for the best because it's just about hoping. In real life, the Rue embargo lives in 10 minutes, so that's going to be good luck when that comes out.
Well, you did actually read one, didn't you? And someone called it a disaster, which is pretty much what I expected. But I'm just absolutely dreading seeing this in a few days, where you're absolutely buzzing because you're off to IMAX to see it. So I've said everything I can on the Michael Bay Transformers. They're not films I care for. I don't like the designs of the Transformers. I think it's a complete betrayal of the animated series. But as I mentioned throughout this review, there are some very small key scenes here and there which do show promise, and I really genuinely do hope that The Last Night is good, although I think it's pretty much just going to be exactly what I've seen before in terms of this franchise. I'm just completely wiped out of this. I actually feel exactly how I do now that when I go and see a Transformers film and come out of it. I'm guessing we've pretty much been reviewed it for the same amount of time as a Transformers film too. But that'll do it for our review on the first 4 Transformers film. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you think of these films. The animated one, we're actually jumping on a review tomorrow for the 1986 Transformers film, so look out for that. And later this week, we will be on a review. I will be on a review too, I promise, guys, for Transformers The Last Night, and we'll see what we have in that movie. Be sure to comment, subscribe, as I said. Hit the bell icon at the side to get a notification every time we bring something new out. We've got loads of new shows coming out, guys. That'll do it from us tonight, and until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.